Chapter 2176. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. For a long time, Qin Hao was busy with his cultivation. Mo2 had left him a few spear Dao manuals. The moves in the manuals were fierce and brutal. Qin Hao stood in the courtyard with his eyes closed. A murderous aura slowly filled the air. Gusts of cold wind seemed to swirl around him. The space in the courtyard became exceptionally cold. The red-robed divine guards on Azura Peak had their own courtyard. The ordinary black-robed Azura guards were all in charge. They lived in a large barracks. Even if they wanted to bathe, they had to do it together. They were not allowed to make decisions on their own. There was no private space. 5 meters in front of Qin Hao stood a black wooden stake that was as tall as 2 people. As he concentrated his spear intent, a murderous spear that seemed to be flowing with thick liquid appeared in his palm. At this moment, Qin Hao's murderous aura became even more intense. He stood there with his eyes closed. The space was filled with a heavy sense of oppression. He was like a murderous god that could not be provoked. In his mind, sword techniques slowly flipped through like pages of a book. Although he had crippled his space divine power and red lotus divine power, he had not forgotten what he had learned in the Seamless Academy. The sword techniques were all imprinted in his spirit. The great Tao is interconnected. The spear is also a sword. The sword Tao can also become the spear Tao. Within his mind, there seemed to be countless figures flying about, brandishing their spears as they danced through the pages of sword techniques. The Dragon Spirit laws had established a firm foundation for Qin Hao's Tao of the spear, and his own comprehension was extremely strong. Through his unceasing practice, his divine sense had deduced many spear techniques that were suitable for him from the numerous sword techniques. Among them, the heart-questioning sword, the startling sword aura, the sword quest pagoda, the 9 heaven sword waterfall, and the sword pavilion were all dug out by him. Among the many sword techniques, the murderous aura was the most ferocious. 1 sword, 7 kills. Now that he had the bloody slaughter spear, Qin Hao practiced the 1 sword, 7 kills thousands of times in his mind. The sword Tao turned into the Tao of the spear. With a thrust of his spear, the sharp spear radiance shot forward. In an instant, the space in the courtyard was filled with Qin Hao's murderous aura. The sense of oppression multiplied. Under the blood spear, several spear energies pierced through the black wooden pile that was as tall as 2 people. In the end, only a thumb-sized hole was left on the wooden pile. The entire wooden pile was pierced through. However, this mark did not seem to have been penetrated by an external force. It was as if the wooden stake had already been pierced by the finger. This spear strike was completely natural. Good marksmanship. A boorish voice came from outside the courtyard. Great deity Mo2, who was ranked 3rd in the Massacre Divine World, stepped in and stood behind Qin Hao. As he looked at the spear hole in the wooden stake, Mo2 praised it repeatedly. Just a small trick, Qin Hao said modestly out of habit. He immediately turned around and said, "Greetings, Divine General Mo Tuesday, yes." Mo2 nodded. His majestic body stood in front of Qin Hao like an iron tower. He cracked open his mouth and revealed a smile that would send chills down the spine of ordinary people. He said, "Your spear strike is very exquisite. It contains several moves, and each move can be changed into a real killing move in an instant. Ordinary people with similar skills cannot take it." Mo2 also used a spear. His understanding and application of the spear technique were better than Qin Hao's. When he saw the hole in the spear, he could almost restore the killing path of the spear and the fear of the enemy. You can actually see the several killing moves in the spear. Qin Hao was very surprised. The 1 sword, 7 kills was the top divine technique in the sword world. He had practiced it for a long time and even honed it in the reincarnation field of the Mirror of Wheels for hundreds of years in the outside world. Only then did he completely restore the 1 sword, 7 kills. Today, he used it for the first time in the spear way. But Mo2 saw through it at a glance. This great deity, who was ranked 3rd in the Massacre Divine World, was indeed extraordinary. No, I can't see through it. Even if I take this spear, I don't have absolute confidence that I can block the real killing move. But I can sense the way of the spear from your spear intent. Mo2 patted Qin Hao's shoulder. Very powerful. Your innate bone structure is strong, and your celestial wheel is perfect. Perhaps in the future, you will replace my position and become the third person in the massacred divine world, after the divine master and the slayer. I think very highly of you. Mo2 was not lying. In the entire massacre divine world, only the divine master of Azura and the slayer's celestial wheel were perfect. Qin Hao was the third. Innate bone structure and celestial wheel could not be changed. When Qin Hao's skills reached a certain level, Mo2 would not be his match. Lord Divine General, you flatter me. Qin Hao had no intention of becoming the third person in the massacre divine world. All he wanted was to leave this place as soon as possible. Mo2 is not flattering you. When you derive 8 godly tattoos, he will not be your match. Zhixiang's laughter came from outside the courtyard. Then, accompanied by the slayer, Zhixiang, who was separated from the divine soul of Azura, stepped in and stood in front of Qin Hao. Subordinate greets the divine master and the slayer. Qin Hao and Mo2 bowed at the same time. No need to be so polite. Zhixiang waved his hand indifferently. He looked at Qin Hao and said, "How is it? Are you used to the new environment in Azura Peak?" Qin Hao cupped his hands and lowered his head. He subconsciously wanted to say that he was used to it, but he immediately changed his tone. He said, "In the heavens and earth, in the chaos universe, as long as the Divine Master is here, subordinate will be here. The massacre divine world's celestial wheel will only serve the Divine Master. There is no need to be so solemn." Zhixiang smiled and thought to himself that he was quite clever. Perhaps when I summon fire to purify the common people and the divine domain sends red coats to hunt you down, you will think that I am cruel and cold-blooded and heartless. This is normal. But in fact, when you really come to my side, you will realize that I treat my subordinates very well. You are now my red coat divine guard and the one with the best aptitude and the greatest potential. No matter what you need, you can tell me or directly tell Mo Tuesday. Zhixiang looked seriously at Qin Hao. I will give you whatever Azura Peak has. This. Qin Hao raised his head slightly and looked at Azura Divine Master in disbelief. He was overwhelmed by the favor. Bring the things into the house, the slayer shouted outside the courtyard. Then a group of red-coat elites with powerful auras walked in. Each of them carried a strange box in their hands. No one knew what was inside. The group entered Qin Hao's room. When they came out, the things were already in the room. Divine Master, I haven't done anything yet. I am ashamed to accept this. Qin Hao was shocked. Although he didn't know what was in the box, the group of red-coat elites looked envious and jealous. He guessed that it must be very valuable. It's just food. Your godly path foundation is too weak, and it is time for you to grow. You need to eat more. Okay, I'm just here to take a look. You can continue to talk about Spear Path. Zhixiang left with the Slayer after he finished speaking. Taking care of the newcomers? Qin Hao looked at the tall divine, General Mo Tuesday, observing the lives of his subordinates. Cough, cough. Yes, Divine Master likes to take care of the newcomers. He is afraid that the younger generation will not have a good life in Azura Peak. Mo2 covered his mouth with his palm. He glanced at the door out of the corner of his eye and revealed a greedy look. The food bestowed by the Divine Lord was the best thing in the world of slaughter. In the past, Mo2 had also tasted it, but the amount he obtained was far less than a tenth of what Qin Hao had. Just thinking about it made him feel intoxicated. Unfortunately, the food Mo2 swallowed was no longer of any use. It was of no substantial help. So Divine Master is such a gentle and considerate God. Although it was an inexplicable favor, Qin Hao still felt warm in his heart. Azura, the master of the world of killing, was not as cruel and terrible as he appeared to be. It seemed that he really didn't understand Azura. You can continue to practice Spear Path. Remember to learn the spear techniques I left for you. Although they don't seem to be very useful, you will understand when you fight. My spear techniques are the most suitable spear path for survival in the world of killing. Mo2 patted Qin Hao's shoulder and left the yard. A gentle and considerate god? Maybe Azura was once one. At that time, Azura had a father, 3 brothers, and a sister. In the vast underworld, Azura, who was associated with ghosts and demons, was actually the most gentle and kindest son of God. Unfortunately, everything changed because of the light region. With the fall of Pluto, his 3 brothers divided the family property and became God Master of Netherworld, God Master of Yumo, and God Master of Ghost. His most beloved sister also died in front of him. At that moment, Azura cultivated the path of killing in his collapse and split into multiple divine personas. His most gentle and kind side was deeply buried in the depths of his heart. What surfaced was a bloodthirsty god. Qin Hao watched Mo2 leave. The first time they met, Mo2 gave him his beloved bloody, slaughter-divine spear. Today, God Master Azura brought the slayers to deliver food to him. Qin Hao naturally understood that the food he ate was definitely not grains. It should be the unique essence of the world of killing. It was a type of Tao fruit that could increase one's divine power. However, Qin Hao was not used to being suddenly cared for. Today's Azura was completely different from the God Master of killing in his memory. Although I heard some things about the world of killing, looking at it now, maybe God Master Azura is not that bad. Qin Hao did not know much. According to Mo2, Shura was once a divine prince, and that was all. Because of some drastic changes, Shura's temperament changed, and he sent down the flames of war to purify the common people. However, this had nothing to do with Qin Hao. He did not have the hobby of digging up other people's past. Now, he just wanted to leave quickly and go to the unknown land of the God King that reincarnation old man mentioned. Only there could he enter the reincarnation area with complete peace of mind. On Azura Peak, Qin Hao did not dare to use the reincarnation mirror. Qin Hao closed his eyes and continued practicing his spear path in his mind. Qin Hao didn't know if Jia Kong and the others had received any gifts from the Divine Master. However, he assumed that there would be some. Although those divine guards didn't have perfect celestial wheels like him, there were still newly promoted divine guards that had survived for 1,000 years and walked up Azura Peak. As he practiced the spear path over and over again, Qin Hao's thoughts became more and more active. He suddenly remembered what Azura had said before he left. When his celestial wheels developed 8 divine patterns, he could replace Mo2's day. In that case, Mo2's strength should be at the celestial grade 8 vein level. The highest was at the celestial grade 9 vein level. This strength was clearly much stronger than Senior Wujin. Actually, Qin Hao had many questions regarding the divine path. For example, why did Slayer and Upper Extremity not have divine path veins? Qin Hao wanted to consult the Azura God Master, but he was afraid to disturb him. After all, he was the high and mighty Azura God, and he was only a small divine guard. Perhaps there would be a chance in the future. In the following days, Qin Hao was still busy with cultivation. In addition to practicing the spear path, Mo2 also took him to many secret areas and illusions in the God domain. In those illusions, Qin Hao killed many people. In Mo2's words, the living beings in the illusions did not exist. They were just manifestations of the Tao intent of the God Master. Therefore, Qin Hao was able to kill without restraint. He killed to his heart's content. Cultivating and killing day after day, he was always living in a bloody slaughterhouse. Although he did not feel guilty, Qin Hao's murderous nature grew stronger in the endless killing. Gradually, he felt that he had lost himself. Chapter 2177. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. There were many blood ponds in Shura Peak. They could be found at the foot of the peak, halfway up the mountain, in the palaces of the divine generals, and even in the Azura Divine Master's bedroom. The blood ponds contained rich slaughter Tao will. When one's body was soaked in it to strengthen his divine body, the slaughter Tao will in the blood would also merge with his Tian Luan divine power. The Shura guards had different statuses, so they enjoyed different treatment. The blood pawns in MO2's palace were much stronger than those of other divine generals. Only low-level black-robe guards would soak in the garbage ponds halfway up the mountain and at the foot of the peak. On this day, Qin Hao followed MO2 out of the palace. They walked up the heavily guarded path, bypassed the Shura Hall, and came to a secret area behind the Divine Master's bedroom. This was the back of the mountain, where a few red-coat elites were guarding. Qin Hao sensed that every red coat in the back of the mountain had at least 40,000 years of cultivation. A few of them had slaughtered qi that was comparable to that of a divine general. Greetings, Divine General Mo. Tuesday, a dozen redcoat leaders bowed. Yes, I am under the orders of the Divine Master to bring a newcomer into the refining pool. You may leave. Mo2 stood there with his tower-like body, which was extremely oppressive. Yes, Divine General. The redcoat leaders looked at Qin Hao silently, then left the back of the mountain in groups. Only Mo2 and Qin Hao were left here. The refining pool was not a place where ordinary Tianlun experts could enter. Today, Divine General Mo2 had brought a newcomer here. The redcoat leaders were envious of Qin Hao, but they were also worried about him. They did not know if this newcomer could survive the refining pool. Divine General, this is... Qin Hao looked around and found that there was only one small blood pond in the huge back of the mountain. The strength of the guards was so strong, and the security was so tight. It was enough to show that this small blood pond was not ordinary. Go in. Mo2 pointed at a small pothole in front of them. It was less than a meter in radius, just big enough for one person to stand in. Qin Hao stretched his neck and looked. The pothole seemed to be in the middle of the ground. The color of the blood was darker than the one he had soaked in before. It was as red as ink. Gulp. Qin Hao subconsciously swallowed his saliva. Wisps of black flames flickered in the pitch-black blood like struggling souls. This small blood pool was like a purgatory that specialized in refining souls. It looked incomparably hot, but it emitted a cold and suffocating feeling that was as cold as a cave. Just me? Qin Hao looked at Mo2 and asked, why aren't Jia Kong, Ying Luo, and Hidden Ghost together? The four of them were newly advanced Heavenly Will experts. They are elsewhere. Moreover, they are not qualified to soak in the refining pool, Mo2 said. Qin Hao didn't ask any more questions. He glanced at the pitch-black blood pool, and a terrifying killing intent gushed towards him, directly penetrating his soul. He felt as if he had fallen into a prison that would swallow him whole without spitting out his bones. Qin Hao clenched his fists and stepped forward, stepping into the pool. Plop! His foot missed a step, and his body immediately sank into the pool. The pool was not deep, and the black water only reached Qin Hao's chest. But when he stepped down, it was as if he had stepped into hell. In an instant, the black water that enveloped his body began to tumble violently. Terrifying black flames danced wildly, and the mournful screams of countless souls faintly sounded in his ears. At this moment, Qin Hao's clothes were instantly corroded by the black water. The terrifying killing intent penetrated his skin, filled his flesh, and flowed through his meridians. He couldn't hold on for even a breath. Qin Hao clenched his fists and raised his head to let out a painful cry. The wheel of the great path on his body immediately emerged, and the bright divine light spread throughout his body. Even so, he still couldn't resist the corrosive power of the black water. Qin Hao felt an incomparably hot power surging from the center of his feet to his head, penetrating the top of his head and piercing through his body. Haha, take your time to enjoy it, kid. I will come back in 7 days. I hope I can still see you then, and not turn into the pool of refined blood. Mo2 ignored Qin Hao's pain, turned around, and left in the direction he came from. Oh, by the way, don't think about coming out. With your current strength, you won't be able to come out after you enter. Only the Divine Master and the Slayer can help you escape. Even I can't do that. Was it painful? Mo2 naturally knew what Qin Hao was going through. After all, he had been in there before. Although the feeling was worse than death, if he could make it through, Qin Hao would have the power comparable to a divine general. Mo2 didn't know why the Divine Master was doing this. Back then, he had entered the refining pool with only 5 meridians of the heavenly chakra plane, and he had almost lost his life in there. According to Qin Hao's current cultivation, how could a mere divine pattern survive? Mo2 didn't understand, but he would firmly follow the will of Shura. I hope you don't die. No, it's a pity. Before Mo2 left the back mountain, he turned around and took one last look. He saw Qin Hao struggling in the black water, just like the souls in the black water that had turned into flames. Wheel light radiated, illuminating the entire back mountain of Shura Peak. Painful screams shook the heavens and earth. Just as Mo2 said, Qin Hao's struggle was useless. His body was stuck in the black water, and he couldn't get out. The boiling soul fire roasted Qin Hao's body, and the black blood gradually drowned him. His consciousness grew weaker until his hands stopped struggling, and the black water covered his head. During this process, Qin Hao's innate soul power was forced to circulate. Although the tranquil, serene water didn't condense into godly power and was only soul power, it still tried to save its master's life, trying to repair the damage to Qin Hao's soul and body. But immediately, the tranquil, serene water was forced back into Qin Hao's life soul. He wasn't at the end of the road. No matter how painful it was, he could still endure it. He wanted to try. The refining pool can't withstand it without 50,000 years of cultivation. Just as you said, that boy hid his cultivation. In the depths of the dark Shura Palace, in front of a cold iron throne, Slayer watched the scene on the screen. The scene of the back mountain was completely reflected. The mirror of reincarnation has the power to increase cultivation and create godly glyphs. But in just 100 years, he can't have 5 godly meridians. At most, he can have 2 or 3. This boy has limitless potential. The earth godly power didn't choose the wrong person. Jixiang also watched the scene on the screen seriously. Then he glanced at Shura's true body tied to the Iron Throne. This was Shura's true form. Shura's true form was still lying weakly on the chair. Thick black hair covered his face, and the heavy god of hell, Iron, had left hideous marks on his body. He breathed weakly. Don't you want to say something? Jixiang wanted to hear his opinion. If I have the strength to speak, I might as well stay on the chair. Amidst the pitch-black hair of the original form, 2 eyes opened, revealing a patch of scarlet. Since he had separated the wisdom form from his main body, then the wisdom form would naturally take care of everything in Azura foam. There was no need for him to waste his energy. If not, why would he separate the wisdom form from the original form? Even though I'm the one who's staring at you, your eyes still make me feel afraid. Jixiang avoided Shura's gaze. Every soul of Shura had its own independent thinking ability. In essence, they were actually the same person, but they weren't. Among the souls, there were some who didn't like each other. For example, Jixiang especially hated Jixiang and Jixiang. One was bloodthirsty, and the other was extremely stupid. You don't have to ask me about the kid from the Sword Realm in the future. Just do as you see fit. In short, you have to force the Earth God power out of his heavenly wheel as soon as possible. Compared to him, I'm more worried about Wu Xiang. Ben Xiang closed his scarlet eyes again. Every soul of Shura had a different personality. Even though they restrained each other, they didn't affect each other. Moreover, once a soul was separated from the true body, it couldn't be taken back in a short period of time. Being able to separate but not take back was the only weakness of the killing path. Therefore, Shura couldn't control what Jixiang wanted to do. Don't worry, we're the same person. Every man for himself. Even though that guy is a bit fierce, he should also want his own good. Jixiang's face curved into a wise smile. I'll let him leave Slaughter World temporarily and find our good brothers to bring back some specialties. The Wisdom Minister had bewitched the Evil Minister to go to the Yellow Spring World and the Ghost Realm. They wanted to refine Qin Hao into a warrior of the slaughtering world and force out the Earth God power in his heavenly wheel. Nourishment and training weren't enough. They needed many methods. Shura laid on the Iron Throne. His breathing became weaker and weaker, as if he had fallen asleep. The dark Shura Palace instantly quieted down. Fate had brought the Earth God power to the massacre world. Although he was now missing a part of his soul, and his power was no longer complete, Shura would not give up on the opportunity to open the Hell King's gate. He had to go in and take a look. Refining pool in the back mountain. In the blink of an eye, 6 days had passed. At this time, in the refining pool, Qin Hao's body was submerged in the black water, revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes. Countless black soul flames were burning above his head, letting out waves of mournful screams. However, he was not affected at all. He was as quiet as a ghost waiting for its prey. 6 days ago, when he first entered the refining pool, he felt like he had returned to Tian Zhao's soul. The pain was even worse than when Jun Mo broke his bones and took his soul. However, after 6 days, Qin Hao's screams became softer and softer. He gradually gave up struggling. Now, he was quietly curled up on the surface of the water, as if he had become one with the refining pool that devoured souls. Qin Hao felt a prickling sensation on his shoulder. From the demonic emblem, threads of evil souls flowed out and condensed into evil spirits. They either crawled on Qin Hao's shoulders and head, or swam freely in the black water of the refining pool. Whether it was the evil spirits or Qin Hao himself, they enjoyed all of this. It was as if he was soaking in a hot spring that could cure all kinds of illnesses. It was so comfortable and natural. However, within Qin Hao's quiet body, his bloodthirsty killing intent had increased exponentially. During these 6 days, it was as if he had been reborn from his previous life. The details of each life played out in front of him, becoming clearer and clearer. Not long ago, when the endless divine realm had been destroyed, Qin Hao had returned to himself. It was only at that moment that he remembered who he really was. He was a descendant of the venerated Pill clan, the supreme Pill god of the divine wasteland original realm, the ruler of the Kunlun continent, and a disciple of the infinite divine realm academy. His name was Qin Hao. My killing intent almost made me lose myself. However, what came with it was an explosive increase in divine power. Qin Hao let out a low voice that no one could hear. The two blood-red eyes floating on the surface of the water flickered with an extremely terrifying and ominous light. Only in the depths of the ominous light was there a trace of rationality. The continuous increase in divine power caused Qin Hao's Tianluan to change. The torment of these 6 days was more obvious than if he had cultivated for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. He didn't know what the reason was, but he could clearly feel that another divine mark was about to appear. He had felt this omen when he was cultivating in the transmigration area. In the past, I couldn't understand the pain of the martial monarch old ancestors' divine enlightenment. Now that I think about it, the pain should be similar to this refining pool. Qin Hao had never thought about divine enlightenment. He also didn't want to do it, especially after witnessing the battle of the infinite divine realm. The Eastern Victory Immortal Sovereign, Master Blind Sword, and many other supreme sword gods had used the Annihilation Divine Source as the price in exchange for the power brought by divine enlightenment. Unfortunately, not a single person had succeeded and been reborn from the death calamity. In Qin Hao's knowledge, divine enlightenment was comparable to a curse. Probably only people like the martial monarch old ancestor could use divine enlightenment 4 times in a row in exchange for 40,000 years of divine power. Chapter 2178. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Practice, Kill and Eat. Qin Hao had obtained a superior godly technique from the slaughter domain and entered the blood pool at the god general level. Every few days, the god master would send someone to deliver a large amount of food and tell him to finish it on time. His life was very fulfilling without any rest, but everything in Shuraphone was monotonous and boring. Now, Qin Hao had a feeling that he was being kept captive by the Lord of Gods, who had given him abundant resources that ordinary people couldn't obtain, which helped him grow rapidly. Perhaps one day, when he grew fat, he would be mercilessly slaughtered. Pet? Or was Qin Hao the prey? He couldn't understand, but his intuition told him that the Shura's methods weren't simple. 7 days later, Mo2 returned to the back mountain and saw Qin Hao quietly staying in the refining pool. He felt lucky and incredible. Mo2 squatted at the edge of the refining pool and looked at Qin Hao seriously, feeling his condition. "You actually made it." Qin Hao quietly curled up in the black water. His body contained a very strong, killing intent. His cold eyes, floating on the water, made Mo2 somewhat afraid to look at them. Compared to when he first came to Shurafeng, Qin Hao's growth was visible to the naked eye. His killing intent was more than a few times stronger, and it was purer and more dangerous. Mo2 couldn't compare to his calm, killing intent once it exploded. "Are you here to take me away?" Qin Hao looked very calm. He didn't seem to want to leave and wanted to stay in the refining pool. "Yes." Mo2 nodded. "It's been 7 days. Even if you stay here, the refining pool will be of little help to you. Now it's time to test the results." "Test the results?" Qin Hao didn't understand. He stayed in the black water and didn't want to move. "Boy, how much do you know about Yellow Spring Domain, Serene Demon Domain, and Ghost Region?" Mo2 asked. "I've been in seclusion under my master's supervision in the lower world," Qin Hao said. "I made the sky wheel before the end of the fire beacon. I haven't left the slaughter domain." "So you know nothing?" Mo2 squinted. Qin Hao nodded in agreement. Mo2 stared into Qin Hao's eyes. After pausing for a few breaths, he said, "A long, long time ago, the Slaughter Realm, Yellow Springs Realm, Nether Devil Realm, and Ghost Realm were all part of the same heavenly Tao. Although they originated from the same source, their cultivation directions were different. You can think of them as the 4 great sects in a city. It should be easy to understand the analogy of a sect. Amongst the 4 great sects, the Slaughter World places extreme emphasis on the nature of killing and is inclined towards the cultivation of Tao insight, which is the concept of a martial artist. The Yellow Springs cultivates the body of bones. Their bones are very strong, and their strength is beyond imagination. Most of the time, the cultivators of the Yellow Springs realm are just empty skeletons without flesh. In particular, the lower the level, the smaller the bones, the more deformed and ugly they would be. It would be difficult for them to form a physical body. Only when one's cultivation reached a certain level, or when one was born with a strong bloodline, could one become like a normal person. However, in battle, almost all the cultivators of the Yellow Springs realm would turn into their primitive state, transforming into Yellow Springs Tao bones to fight their enemies. The Yellow Springs Tao bones could withstand the impact of divine arts and divine artifacts. Qin Hao listened to Mo2's explanation quietly. His expression did not change, but he was slightly moved. From the looks of it, wouldn't the Yellow Springs realm be filled with walking skeletons? It would be very difficult to recognize a person. It might sound a little funny. After all, they were all skeletons and looked similar. It would be difficult to distinguish between men and women. The Nether Devil realm is the opposite of the Yellow Springs realm. They place more emphasis on the cultivation of a soul. Often, they do not have a physical body, only a soul, said Mo2's. Only a soul? Qin Hao's expression changed instantly. Without a physical body as a vessel, wouldn't the heavenly Tao erase their souls if they were left floating around? In any divine realm, living beings would definitely not be able to withstand the consequences of losing their physical bodies. For example, ordinary people who had never cultivated before would die on the spot once their physical bodies were destroyed. That was because their souls were directly erased by the heavenly Tao. And the stronger the cultivation, the more the soul could withstand the power of the heavenly Tao. In the divine wilderness continent, those above the supremacy realm could retain their souls for a short period of time, but they couldn't hold on for too long. Emperor-level cultivators could only retain their souls for a month at most. Back then, the old demon sealed his soul in the demon refining gourd. That was how he managed to escape the power of the heavenly Tao. After surviving for 1,000 years, he immediately wanted to seize Qin Hao's physical body after coming out of the demon refining gourd. Because he didn't have a physical body, Emperor Yuan's soul couldn't be retained for long. According to Divine General Mo2, the people of the Nether Devil realm were born with a wisp of their souls. They were born without a physical body and always existed in the state of their souls. They were really abnormal. This is the uniqueness of the Nether Devil realm. It is also their natural advantage. MO2 revealed an ugly and strange smile. The god of the underworld took away the physical body of the Nether Devil realm, but gave them the ability to immortality. It wasn't just the Nether Devil realm. Even if the divine Tao powerhouses of the Nether Devil realm went to the heavenly Tao of other divine realms, they wouldn't be erased. At most, they would be slightly affected. This depended on the strength of the heavenly Tao of other divine realms. Amazing. Qin Hao smacked his lips. The Netherworld realm cultivated the Tao of bones, while the Nether Devil realm cultivated the Tao of souls. They should be considered evil in any plane and should be eliminated. The Ghost realm is a little more complicated than the Netherworld realm and the Nether Devil realm because their appearances are different and they are all very distorted. They are mainly good at spreading fear. You can simply see it as a kind of curse ability. They will dig out the deepest shadow in the enemy's heart according to each person's consciousness and use it to curse the enemy to death. MO2 explains simply. The Ghost realm was very complicated, and the special power of cultivators was also relatively difficult to understand. But they all started from the fear point and continued to deepen the shadow until the power of the Ghost realm's resentment seeped into the soul and caused the death of the death curse. Because the Ghost realm was neither a god nor a human, and their faces were hideous and ugly. Even the skeletons of the Netherworld realm were better looking than those monsters of all shapes and sizes. Therefore, when the Ghost God Lord was first born, the Underworld God King hated him the most. Compared to the four of them, Shura was the most favored because Shura's appearance was the most normal among the four children of the Underworld God. The Netherworld realm, Nether Devil, and Guad were all abnormal to the outside world. However, they were ultimately living beings born from the Underworld God King's Tao will and had the Underworld God's Tao flowing in them. Therefore, even if the Underworld God disliked them, he still gave them space to live. After all, they were a part of the Underworld God's Tao will. Bone Tao, godly soul, curse that spreads fear, and Shura, who is mainly murderous. Qin Hao muttered silently in his heart, and finally had a general understanding of this primitive land. Do you understand now? Come out. I'll take you to see it for yourself. MO2 stood up from the side of the refining pool. His tall body looked down at Qin Hao under his feet. This brat came to Shura Peak using the best, refining the best, and eating the best. Now, it was time to see how Qin Hao's murderous nature was compared to the Netherworld Bone Tao, Nether Devil Tao, and Ghost Tao. Could it break the Netherworld realm, Nether Devil Tao, and Ghost Tao? Chapter 2179. Luodi's godly power was Underworld God King's strongest Tao intent power. It could change a god's godly power, godly soul, and even natal soul. It could allow the godly power, godly soul, and natal soul to change from one person to another. Changing one's body and soul and gender were just the simplest effects of Luodi's godly power. Qin Hao had hidden a strand of Luodi's Tao intent in his evil power. Perhaps he didn't even know about it, but Azura had clearly sensed it. In order to dig out this power that could change a god's Tao intent from Qin Hao's evil power, other than forcing Da Qin Hao, he had to let him fight. Fighting was the best way to stimulate one's potential. Therefore, Zhixiang had sent Wu Xiang to the Yellow Springs 3 realms to borrow some people from Yellow Springs' godly lord, Yu Demon Master, and Ghost God Master. Today, the people had been brought back to Azura Phone by Wu Xiang. At this moment, in MO2's palace, Qin Hao followed MO2 back to the Tao platform and went directly to the Tao platform. Looking at the 3 people on the platform, Qin Hao had a complicated gaze. This was his first time coming into contact with cultivators from Yellow Springs' Godly Lord, Nether Devil Godly Lord, and Ghost Domain. Just as MO2 had said, the 3 things on the platform were really strange. An especially tall skeleton stood in front of Qin Hao. The bones were abnormally thick and solid, and they were suffused with golden light. From the golden light, one could feel the tyrannical power contained in the skeleton. Beside the golden skeleton, a godly soul floated around like a shadow. One could only see its silhouette, but not its face. The aura it emitted was extremely gloomy and cold. As for the people from Ghost Domain, Qin Hao couldn't make an evaluation. At first glance, his heart stopped beating, and he rested for a few seconds. In front of him, the Ghost Domain cultivator was wearing tattered red clothes. His clothes were covered in blood, and countless wounds were carved on his body. It wasn't clear whether he had been scratched or scratched by others. Worms wriggled in his wounds, and his pale face was full of abscesses. He smelled rotten all over, and he looked very disgusting. The Ghost Domain cultivator had 3 arms and no mouth on his face. Through the layers of blood on his tattered clothes, Qin Hao used the eyes of all spirits to see that there was a huge crack on his belly. It looked like a huge mouth, hiding in his clothes and smiling at Qin Hao. Inside the huge mouth, he could vaguely see a few baby arms waving. Bones, ghosts, and evil spirits. In the eyes of the ordinary people of the lower dimensions, any one of these would be enough to shock them to death several times over. They probably couldn't even dream of such terrifying things. Okay, let's get to know each other. These 3 are the disciples of the famous sects of the Netherworld sector, the Nether Demon sector, and the Ghost Realm. For the sake of the 3 God Masters, they were invited to Azura Phone to have a competition with you. Mo2 said, God Mo2, you're too polite. We're honored to come to Azura, Lord's God Peak. The golden skeleton of the Yellow Springs realm opened and closed its hollow jaw, letting out a series of cracking noises. We from the godly Lord also like killing. Even the most ferocious evil spirits of Ghost Domain would be tempted by such a great reward. The ugly Ghost Domain cultivator had no mouth, and his voice came from his stomach. It was like a baby's cry, and it was creepy. Mo2 nodded satisfyingly. He looked at Qin Hao and said, They're the geniuses of the Yellow Spring world, the Nether Demon world, and the Ghost Hunter. They're the top-class geniuses. To show respect, they have shown their best state in front of you. The golden skeleton, shadow, ghost, and evil spirits could actually use their powerful godly power to condense a normal body. However, in their opinion, those heavenly wheel realm cultivators who were flashy but not practical and became handsome to tempt other god realms might be good. But today, they came to Azura Peak. This was the territory of Azura God Lord, and Azura was the brother of their God Lord. Therefore, to show respect, the 3 of them showed their true faces to Qin Hao. Don't think that this is a simple competition. They came to the world of slaughter because they took the reward from Azura God Lord. They will kill you at all costs and bring the reward back. Your goal is the same: kill them. If you don't, you will die. Mo2 secretly transmitted his voice to Qin Hao. Qin Hao's body trembled slightly. He nodded and thought, so that's how it is. No wonder the 3 of them showed their strongest state. They were ready to kill him directly. They didn't even need to tease him. 3 against 1. If you are ready, then let's start. Mo2 left the platform. As he walked, he pointed at Qin Hao and said, Kill him, and you can bring back the things you want of the Netherworld realm, Nether Devil realm, and Ghost realm. If you die on the platform, your families will definitely not dare to pursue the matter. You know this better than I do. This battle was planned by Azura God Lord. The golden skeleton, shadow, ghost, and evil spirits had extraordinary positions in their god realms. Even so, if they died on Azura Peak, the forces behind them wouldn't dare to ask Azura God Lord for compensation. Hee, 3 against 1. It's a bit like bullying a brother from the world of slaughter. Ghost's voice sounded very cold. The 3 of them were proud people. Normally, they wouldn't team up to deal with a target. That would be too degrading. Since Azura God Lord personally appointed him as an opponent, he must be extraordinary. The golden skeleton realized that perhaps Qin Hao was very strong. Evil spirits only want to be rewarded. So, young man from the world of slaughter, please die for evil spirits. The cultivator from Ghost Realm spat out a shrill scream. His blood-stained red clothes suddenly fell apart, revealing a body full of scars. The blood-red Tian Luan surrounded his twisted limbs. The divine light almost covered his entire body, and the edges flashed with 3 dark red god veins. Wong! Wong! The golden skeleton and shadow released their Tian Luan at the same time. Threads of divine light wrapped around the gaps of the golden skeleton. Like Ghost's dark Tian Luan, they belonged to the 3 god veins. 3 god tier Tian Luan. Qin Hao stepped back slightly. His opponents all had 30,000 years of divine path. Moreover, they were considered monsters in the Netherworld realm, Nether Devil realm, and Ghost realm. They were similar to Rikujinji's Lu Qiu, Zhenlong's Long Mi, and Loi's Endless Realm. Their strength couldn't be underestimated. Not long ago, Jun Mo brought the divine soldier from the Tianjiao god domain to Azura Feng and sent Huang Dao to fight against 5 new Tian Luan experts with 20,000 years of divine path. In the end, he was killed here. Qin Hao didn't expect that it would happen to him today. Although the number was less than what Huang Dao faced, the golden skeletons, shadow ghosts, and evil spirits weren't new Tian Luan realm experts, but top experts who had cultivated for 30,000 years. According to Qin Hao's current situation, even if his Tian Luan was perfect, it was almost equivalent to courting death to fight against 3 god-tier Tian Luan experts with 30,000 years of divine path. Divine General, this doesn't seem to be reasonable, does it? Qin Hao turned to look at Mo2, who was standing below the stage. Don't play dumb with me. You didn't die in a refining pool. Not to mention that you only have 1 or 2 god veins. You can't beat them. Your perfect Tian Luan is also a waste. There's no need for you to exist. Mo2's tone was extremely cold. What? The golden skeleton was shocked. Tian Luan, perfect? A surprised face suddenly appeared on the vague outline of the shadow. It seemed to be frightened. The evil spirit just wants to get back the reward. Fortunately, he only has 2 god veins. The blood flowing in the body of the Ghost Realm cultivator seemed to stiffen for a moment before it flowed again. Alas, I was actually seen through by the Divine General. Well, as you wish, I'll prove the necessity of my existence. Qin Hao opened his arms, and a vast wool radiated from his body. 2 black lines flashed on the edge of the wheel. At the same time, the turbulent, murderous aura spread out. The murderous aura was so strong that it made people tremble. Even the skeleton from the Netherworld realm, the ghost from the Nether Devil realm, and the evil spirits covered in blood were suffocated. Chapter 2180. 114 Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The fearless are fearless. The refining pool at the back of Azura Peak was a special place. Those who entered the refining pool and didn't die were bound to have good fortune. However, not all Azura guards could enter the refining pool at the back of the mountain. Even the red-clothed elites couldn't. Even so, many divine generals died in the refining pool's black water. Those who survived basically developed the divine vein. The refining pool's function was similar to the divine solution mentioned by Martial Lord Ancestor. Those who could withstand it would have 10,000 years of cultivation. Those who couldn't withstand it would have to fuse with the black water and become part of the refining pool's nourishment. Therefore, Mo2 asserted that Qin Hao must have improved his divine path by 10,000 years. In fact, it was indeed so. After the refining pool's baptism, although Qin Hao hadn't completely developed the 4th divine vein of Heavenly Wheel, he felt that it wouldn't take long for the 4th divine vein to appear. Perhaps because the Heavenly Wheel's grade was too high, the refining pool's powerful killing power could directly upgrade divine generals. But it made Qin Hao fall short by a little. However, the impact wasn't big. Qin Hao had 3 divine veins. Now that he had unsealed the second one, it gave him a chance to further release his strength. At this time, on the platform, the great Tao Wheel's light was solemn. The pitch-black light emitted a heavy feeling. Countless evil spirits swayed on the body, moving according to Qin Hao's thoughts. They cried, wailed, screamed, and laughed crazily. It was as if all the evil in the world had gathered. Every evil spirit was filled with the desire to destroy. Suddenly seeing Qin Hao's appearance, the golden skeleton, ghost, and evil spirit all took a few steps back. That evil aura hit them in the face. The three of them didn't have any facial features, so their expressions couldn't be seen. However, they still gave people a feeling of shock. In the golden skeleton's eye sockets, two soul flames flickered. The ghost's face that suddenly appeared suddenly disappeared. The evil spirit's movement that wanted to attack stiffened. In an instant, the three top monsters of the god world didn't dare to move forward. Looking at Qin Hao's evil aura and the sick smile on his face, they vaguely felt that he was the ghost, the evil spirit that crawled from hell. In comparison, the golden skeleton, ghost, and evil spirit seemed much gentler. Attack and kill the target. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave Azura Peak. Mo2 on the platform urged them as he licked his lips. With interest, Malevolent Spirit and the others were silent for a while. As if they had communicated through their thoughts, they all attacked Qin Hao at the same time. Dong! The golden skeletons. The skeleton was. The bones were. They were. Bones were the bones were the bones was Bone Realm. And they were the bones were Bone Realm were. Bones were realm. Bones were realm worlds. Howl! The ghost let out a sharp shriek at Qin Hao. From its floating soul body, numerous remnant souls suddenly spilled out. They danced in the air and charged forward, surrounding Qin Hao like a whirlwind. At this moment, the space around the Dao platform was filled with all sorts of screeching sounds. These screeching sounds were like sharp blades that pierced into Qin Hao's soul through his hearing. Soul Realm's best attack was to attack the opponent's soul. This was an innate advantage. It was very harmful to the soul. An ear-piercing sound pierced his eardrums. Countless remnant souls danced in front of Qin Hao's eyes. Wisps of black soul light penetrated his body and entered his divine soul unceasingly. It was as if countless hands were tearing him apart. His consciousness instantly fell into chaos. Meditation art. Qin Hao concealed his spirit and qi. He chanted the Yaowang Peak Dao art. With the support of Tian Luan's divine power, the Emperor Dao art evolved into a divine art. In an instant, the weak sound waves from his mouth were like a spring that cleansed the soul. Under the meditation art, the remnant souls that entered his body were forced out. They did not dare to continue attacking his soul. Cut the heart demon, refine the Dao heart, purify the soul, and resist the sound waves. With the meditation art, evil spirits will not be able to invade. What's going on? The ghost chanted. It was surprised to find that Qin Hao was not affected. He seemed to be immune to soul attacks. At this moment, the evil ghost took a step forward. From a huge mouth on its stomach, the heads of babies poked out. The children were bleeding from their 7 orifices. They sang a song, mellow, poignant, and like a series of intertwined stories. The song lingered in the air. Qin Hao found that the meditation art could not stop the nursery rhyme from the evil ghost's stomach. Moreover, the nursery rhyme seemed to have a magical power. Qin Hao could not help but open his heart to listen to the story in the song. Buzz! His sea of consciousness suddenly sank. It was as if his vision had fallen into darkness. Qin Hao did not understand the story in the song, but he encountered the most unforgettable and most terrifying scene in his life. In front of his eyes, everything on the Dao platform changed. This place turned into a dazzling divine king palace. In the deepest prison of the palace, there was a youth whose arms were cut off. Sharp hooks were hooked to his shoulder blades as he hung in the air. Jun Mo held the sky splitter in his hand. He struck the young man's body again and again. The heavy force caused the young man's limbs to be deformed. His internal organs were crushed, and he vomited blood. Then, there were people who were proficient in butchering who came with all kinds of knives. First, they used a small knife the size of a finger to cut the young man's body. The wounds were very small. The young man was covered in cuts and bruises, but he did not die. His blood flowed out at a steady rate. It was as if they were deliberately enjoying the process of the young man's death. Following that, another group of sorcerers came and splashed a lot of dirty water on the young man. Qin Hao still didn't know what it was. In short, his body was in endless pain, and his soul began to disintegrate under the spells of the sorcerers. Roar! At this time, in the outside world, Qin Hao stood on the platform. He held his head with both hands and let out a roar. His eyes were crimson red, and the evil spirits all over his body were thrown into chaos as he lost his mind. But this was not the end. Just as Qin Hao saw what happened to him in the Tianzhao Divine Realm, the tragic deaths of God Master of Avicii, Daisakong, and Blind Sword appeared in his mind. The bloody scene appeared again. The destruction of the divine origin forced many sword gods to disintegrate, but all their struggles and resistance were useless. Pairs of pale hands stretched out from under his feet and firmly grasped Qin Hao's ankles. Qin Hao looked down and was shocked to discover that the ground beneath his feet was covered with the corpses of Senior Avicii and the others. The sword gods who had died in vain were crying tears of blood. They grabbed Qin Hao's feet and crawled up his body. As they gnawed on his flesh, they cursed him and wanted to drag him down to hell to be buried with them. In the end, Qin Hao saw Xiao Han, Bao Erwuk, Muri, Xiaogua, Yishui Han no. Unbearable fear swallowed up his remaining reason. Even if it was fake, Qin Hao could no longer distinguish between the real and the fake. The ghost curse had already been planted. The more he worried, the more he feared, the more it would become the hand of the death god that grabbed him by the throat and dragged him into the purgatory of death. The evil ghost watched as the swaying evil spirits around Qin Hao began to wither. At first, he was frightened by these things, but now, it didn't seem to be a big deal. The evil ghost didn't see the scene in Qin Hao's sea of consciousness. He only used the ghost's resentment power to cast the curse and let affect Qin Hao. The one who truly deepened the fear and made Qin Hao collapse was Qin Hao himself. As expected, he's still a rookie. Mo2 sensed that after Qin Hao was cursed by the evil ghost, his evil power was rapidly weakening. After all, this was the first time he encountered the ghost's ghost path. It was inevitable that he would fall for it. However, Mo2 would definitely not attack because of this. The more desperate the situation was, the more it could force out Qin Hao's potential. If he wanted to dig out the Earth God power from the evil power for Shura, he would have to pay a price. After all, the Wisdom Minister, the Evil Minister, and the Slayer were all watching this battle from the shadows. Even if they were to attack, it definitely wouldn't be Mo Tuesday boom. A heavy crash resounded. Blood spurted out from Qin Hao's throat. He didn't seem to feel it at all. He just hugged his head in pain. No matter how the evil spirits around him struggled, he didn't move at all. He just let the golden skeleton's fists hit him repeatedly. However, in his sea of consciousness, Qin Hao clearly felt that his body was being damaged. He wanted to wake up, but he couldn't wake up from the evil ghost curse. His consciousness sank deeper and deeper. You've been cursed. If you can't get rid of the fear in your heart, you'll sink into it forever. You can't get rid of it. A voice resounded in his ears. Among the dead spirits crawling all over his body, a face that Qin Hao didn't expect appeared in front of him. It was the evil god, Yin Laobei. You? Qin Hao couldn't help but be shocked when he saw Yin Laobei. His consciousness instantly focused on the other party. Don't be nervous. I've died long ago. However, because of the evil power, I've remained in the depths of your sea of consciousness. As long as you don't purposely think about me, I'll never appear. Yin Laobei said. I didn't purposely think about you. Qin Hao was speechless. He was unknowingly cursed by the evil ghost. How could he have the time to think about Yin Laobei? It's because you're about to die. However, the power of all evil isn't willing to accept it. I'm also a part of all evil. That's why I can appear. Yin Laobei didn't want to explain too much. He said, now, you have to get rid of the fear in your heart. A person without fear will naturally not be affected by the evil ghost's curse. Yin Laobei didn't really understand the power of the evil ghost cultivators. However, his remnant consciousness wasn't affected at all. He could only guess that the origin of the ghost Tao was the person being cursed. That's easy for you to say. Qin Hao didn't want to be swallowed by the shadow in his heart. However, everyone had a weak point. The ghost owl was based on this point. What could he do? There's no other way. Yin Laobei could clearly feel that Qin Hao's evil power was fading away. He wouldn't be able to hold on for long before he died in the ghost owl. Qin Hao couldn't get rid of his fear. Then, only Yin Laobei could do it. When he thought of this, the remnant consciousness that Yin Laobei had turned into suddenly expanded. He opened his mouth and madly sucked in Qin Hao's body. He sucked in all the dead souls that were crawling all over his body. Finally, Yin Laobei burped. I suddenly forgot that I also relied on devouring other people's Tao to form an amalgamation of evil souls. I really missed the taste of eating evil. Yin Laobei laughed as he disappeared from Qin Hao's sea of consciousness. Qin Hao was stunned in his sea of consciousness. There was only darkness in front of him. This time, there were no more images. His fear had been sucked dry by Yin Laobei. Bang! His body flew high into the air. The feeling of weightlessness caused Qin Hao to walk out of his sea of consciousness and return to reality. At this moment, an indescribable pain swept through his body. Qin Hao didn't know how long he had been beaten up and how many of his bones had been broken by the golden skeleton's fists. Fortunately, his body was very strong. Before he advanced to divine ascension, he had been tempered by the mysterious Heaven Kars Cave and the hidden Tao Spirit Waterfall in the Divine Palace. After he advanced to divine ascension, he had been tempered by the Kunlun Sea and the Seamless Academy. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if the bone path of the Yellow Springs realm was comparable to a divine artifact, then Qin Hao's body wasn't any weaker than a divine artifact. Bang! Another heavy punch came flying over. However, this time around, it was firmly caught by Qin Hao's palm. You had a good fight, didn't you? A sickly smile hung on his face. There was no longer a trace of confusion in his eyes. Qin Hao grabbed the golden skeleton's hand and fiercely swung it down from the sky. In the next second, his body flashed past like an afterimage and kicked the evil ghost's face. The pustules on the evil ghost's face flew everywhere. Boom! The golden skeleton smashed into the Tao platform, creating a hole in it. A stone was spat out from its upper and lower jaws, and it stepped out while cursing. It shouted at the evil spirit. What's going on? He struggled out. How would I know? The Tao of fear around this guy seems to have been absorbed by his evil energy. Half of the evil ghost's face caved in, and the mouth on its stomach kept spitting out green liquid. One could vaguely see the heads of babies crying. Chapter 2181. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Walking out of the darkness after falling into it, overcoming one's fear, and starting a counterattack from adversity. This kind of quality was rare and precious. Interesting. Mo too saw that Qin Hao was awake and his condition was gradually returning to normal. He somewhat understood why he could survive the refining pool. This was the ability of a perfect heaven wheel. Breaking the curse of the ghost owl was actually not that difficult. At least the top geniuses of the slaughter world could do it. In front of pure slaughter, the weakness of fear did not exist. Qin Hao had only broken the power of the ghost's resentment. It was not easy to completely defeat the golden skeleton, ghost, and ghost. The golden skeleton did not dwell too much on the shadow that Qin Hao had broken free from. As the skeletal wheel rotated, its skeleton became thicker and stronger. The light it emitted was as if it was made of gold and iron. It took a step forward and rushed toward Qin Hao. The giant mouth on the evil spirit's belly opened wider and wider. Deformed and thin figures crawled out one after another like spiders crawling on the ground with their heads turned upside down to look at Qin Hao. Their crawling speed was extremely fast, and they let out ear-piercing screeches as they pounced on the evil spirits and bit them. The malicious Tao, will of the ghost's resentment, seeped into the evil spirits and continued to spread fear to the depths of their souls. Because Yin Laobei had sucked away the pain in the deepest part of Qin Hao's heart, Qin Hao was still affected by the curse. However, the effect was not too great. After a brief trance, His eyes became even more ferocious. The evil spirits actually started to fiercely devour the ghost's resentment. Boom! The golden fist smashed over. The slaughter world, the underworld world, the nether devil world, and the ghost world were all part of the heavenly path of the underworld. Their wills were similar to each other, and they were not suppressed by the heavenly might. This fist exploded with 100% of the golden skeleton's power, and the great path seemed to be shattered. Qin Hao controlled the evil spirits and ghost spirits to tear at each other. His right fist violently punched forward and collided with the golden skeleton's attack. With a terrifying explosion, an incomparably turbulent power was transmitted back. Qin Hao took a step back, and a strong feeling of breaking bones appeared in his arms. What tyrannical power! He was shocked by the strength of a Yellow Springs bone path. This was because the grade of his heavenly wheel was higher than the other parties. If the two were the same, one could imagine what would happen to Qin Hao. Perhaps a single punch from the golden skeletons would shatter his physical body or even shatter all of his divine bones. The black tide covered the top of his head, and the shadow of the specter became bigger and bigger. The soul power that it emitted also became stronger and stronger. It seemed that its Tao intent had been disregarded by Qin Hao, and it was enraged. Within the soul light that permeated the air, the remnant souls were actually like ghostly spirits. They covered the sky and covered the earth as they pounced on Qin Hao's body, and they started to bite and tear at the evil spirit. Since he couldn't directly destroy Qin Hao's divine soul, he would tear apart his evil power bit by bit. Until the evil spirit was devoured, the body was eaten by the ghost baby, and the bones in his body were refined into Tao bones by the golden skeletons. The evil spirits, specters, and skeletons would turn Qin Hao into nothing and share everything about him, including the perfect heavenly wheel Tao intent. The battle became more and more intense, and the sky was filled with ear-piercing and crazy screeches. Evil spirits, ghost babies, remnant souls, and these existences that were basically unseen in the righteous path of the divine realm were all gathered on a small platform. They were all madly biting and devouring each other. They were all so crazy. Qin Hao's cultivation was stronger than his opponents, but the strength that he could unleash was limited. Facing 3 opponents of the same extreme, he fell into a stalemate for a while. He couldn't break through the golden skeletons directly, and he couldn't gain the upper hand in terms of Tao intent. This was the first time he had encountered such a difficult opponent after becoming evil. As they fought and exhausted each other, the evil aura became thinner and thinner. Your evil power seems to have the characteristic of merging with all laws and can extract the enemy's laws for your own use. If you can't refine it in a short time, why don't you try to reverse your opponent's divine path? Mo2 quietly watched the battle with his arms crossed, and his voice quietly entered Qin Hao's ears. From the previous battle with Huang Dao to the current situation, Mo2 could roughly see that evil power had gathered countless Tao intents, and this was the reason why it wasn't affected by other laws. And Qin Hao, as the main body, could use this characteristic to directly penetrate his opponent's laws and deal a fatal blow. In the process, he could turn his opponent's laws and Tao intents into a part of his evil power. However, he should need some time to digest it. Reverse my opponent's divine path? Mo2's words enlightened Qin Hao, and it was as if a window had opened for him in an instant. He couldn't devour the resentment of ghosts in a short time, but he could use his own body as a carrier to guide the divine power of the skeletons, specters, and evil spirits to convert them. He could definitely give it a try. After all, if Qin Hao reversed the 3 opponents' divine paths, it would definitely be difficult for the evil spirits, specters, and skeletons to adapt. At best, their divine power would become chaotic, their laws would become abnormal, and their heavenly wheel might even collapse directly. His eyes lit up, and Qin Hao began to frantically activate the evil power of the heavenly wheel. His originally pitch-black pupils gradually turned white, and the evil spirits turned into tentacles that entangled the golden skeletons, specters, and evil spirits, or directly pierced into their flesh and Tao intents. Their bodies and souls were pierced by the evil light like sharp thorns. The evil spirits and specters were shocked to discover that their resentment and soul power were beginning to converge uncontrollably into Qin Hao's heavenly wheel. It was the same for the golden skeletons. Their thick bones were full of evil aura, and traces of bright golden light flowed towards Qin Hao's body like liquid, and finally converged into the heavenly wheel, intertwining with the Tao intents of the evil spirits and specters. In an instant, with Qin Hao as the core and the evil spirits as the link, the Tao platform gathered the different divine path powers in the heavenly wheel, turning into three torrents that poured back into the evil spirits, specters, and golden skeletons, respectively into their heavenly wheels. The first to change was the golden skeletons. Qin Hao used the specters' remnant souls to attack, and through the evil spirits, they fiercely attached to the thick skeleton. At this moment, an extremely terrifying thing happened. The golden skeleton's bright bones almost immediately lost their luster. After being attacked by the specter's remnant souls, the soul flames in the eyes of the Yellow Springs realm cultivator, who was not proficient in the Tao of the divine soul, were instantly extinguished. He did not even have the time to scream before his sturdy bones, which had been tempered thousands of times, were turned into white powder with a crash. Body and soul destroyed, Qin Hao's heart trembled with a thump, and his gaze fell on the pile of bone powder in disbelief. The Yellow Springs bone path, which he could not break through directly, actually collapsed after being attacked by the specter's divine souls. No! Immediately after, the specter's miserable screams came from midair. Qin Hao raised his head to look. The nether demon realm cultivator grew bigger and bigger, and his soul light turned into a black tide that enveloped the Tao platform. After receiving the power of the specter's resentment, the gigantic specter's faces of babies appeared one after another on the gigantic specter's body, as if they had been corroded through. Every time the specter's faces appeared, the specter's soul body would turn into pieces of broken holes. Then, the sky full of evil spirits swept past, and the gigantic specters disappeared. Bastard, what did you do? What did you do to the specters? Amidst the hoarse curses, the blood dripping from the evil ghost evaporated without any reason. His rotting flesh melted little by little under the infusion of the evil energy, revealing his white bones. Soon, the specters lost their last drop of blood, and their rotten flesh melted away, turning them into skeletons. The moment their blood evaporated, their divine source, which had lost the power of the specter's resentment, was destroyed. Their pale white skeletons scattered, and the specters that were biting the evil spirits also disappeared. Qin Hao was dumbfounded as he looked at the three pitiful fellows. He wanted to say in his heart, "No way." The golden skeleton's bone paths were very hard, and their strength was boundless. Qin Hao's perfect heaven wheel could not break them even with the support of two divine veins if he did not release his full strength. The specter's soul power was also very strong. Although Qin Hao was not affected by them because he relied on the meditation art, he could not activate his divine soul power to directly destroy the specters. Just by looking at the specters' remnant souls and the evil spirits biting each other, one could understand how strong their soul power was. Needless to say, the specters were even more so. Among the three opponents, Qin Hao was very clear that the specters were the most harmful to him. The specters' resentment curses made the enemy sink into fear. If not for the appearance of Yin Laobei's remnant consciousness, Qin Hao might not have been able to walk out of his consciousness. Yellow Spring Bone Path, Ghost Path, and Ghost Path were all very terrifying. Qin Hao did not expect that just by listening to Mo2's suggestion and exchanging the three godly path laws, the specters, the skeletons, and the specters, who were difficult to deal with, would die instantly, their bodies and souls destroyed. The whites of Qin Hao's eyes gradually disappeared. His pitch-black eyes flashed, and he looked down at the evil spirits wrapped around his arms as if he were dreaming. He could clearly feel that the moment the specters, and skeletons died, the remaining power of the specters' resentment, soul power, and bone power in the evil spirits began to silently assimilate with the evil forces. The fierce battle became strangely quiet in the blink of an eye. Below the stage, Mo2 was also shocked. He stood there in a daze, looking at Qin Hao with a flash of fear in his eyes. This guy, what kind of monster is he? Mo2 was extremely agitated. According to Ji Xiang's instructions, he had only quietly repeated what the godly master had told him to Qin Hao. As a result, the top genius of the Yellow Spring Three Realms, who had brought Shuro Luo Feng, disappeared from the face of the earth. That's right. That scene just now was the true performance of the filthy earth godly power. At this time, in the Azura Shrine, Ji Xiang, Wu Xiang, and 2FA were trembling as they looked at the scene on the light screen. They clearly saw the battle on Mo2's side, reversing the godly path laws and perfectly exchanging the godly soul between the two paths. This power was the ultimate profound of the Nether God King, the godly path. He can definitely open the Nether King gate. In the entire wilderness, only he is qualified to open that gate. Wu Xiang tried hard to keep calm, his fists trembling in his sleeves. However, this is the first time this kid has used the filthy earth power. He can't control it skillfully yet. He needs more guidance. Ji Xiang suppressed the wild joy in his heart. If Qin Hao could perfectly operate the filthy earth godly power, the specters, the golden skeletons, the specters would not have died on the spot. It seemed that for a long time, they still needed to give Qin Hao more detailed guidance. Chapter 2182. Qin Hao benefited a lot from the battle with the wraiths and ghosts. First, he gained a basic understanding of the cultivation abilities of the Yellow Springs world, Nether Demon world, and Ghost region. Second, the evil force could reverse the divine Tao laws between individuals. This discovery was of great significance, especially after Qin Hao witnessed the miserable state of the golden skeletons and wraiths after their godly power was reversed. He undoubtedly gained another trump card to counterattack. As long as he caught his opponents off guard, it would not be a problem for him to fight above his level. Regarding the evil force, Qin Hao was summoned to the Azura Palace after the battle and had a long talk with Ji Xiang. In the following days, Qin Hao continued to cultivate in Azura Peak, with the red-robed divine guards accompanying him. Azura, God, personally guiding his cultivation, and all kinds of Tao nourishment were continuously sent to him. His progress was remarkable. This wait lasted for dozens of years. Azura Peak's resources were endlessly given to Qin Hao, and he was obviously being nurtured by the God Master as a key seedling. While Qin Hao was cultivating in the world of slaughter, many major events were happening in the outside world. 100 years ago, the Great Pathsword world was on the verge of being destroyed by the Tianzhao God Domain. The following year, the army of sword cultivators was mobilized to point their swords at the Dongwang world and raze it to the ground with thunderous methods. Dongbai, Token, and many other disciples of Dongwang died in this battle. Not only Dongwang's world, but the two neighboring worlds also suffered. Under the command of Zhan Wu, God Lu and Dragon Master led the 8 groups of sword cultivators and the Beast Army to raze the 3 worlds to the ground. Among them, the God Masters of 2 worlds died on the spot. Dongwang's luck was better, as he was protected by an extremely powerful force in the wilderness. The force that saved Dongwang was called the Empty Divine World. Its God Master was very powerful, and even God Lu and Dragon Master together could not stop him. But this was not the important point. The truly thorny part was that Lord God Kong belonged to the Radiant Divine Realm and was a subordinate of the Radiant King. Dongwang was Lord God Kong's illegitimate son. With these 2 connections, even though Zhan Wu had the support of the War God clan, he could only watch as Dongwang was taken away. The realm war between the Dongwang realm and the Great Way of the Sword Realm had caused quite a stir in the Untainted Land. This was because the Godly King-level forces, the Godly King of War, and the Godly King of Light were involved behind the scenes. However, this battle ended very quickly. The divine realm under Donghuang's rule had been destroyed, but the Radiant King did not pursue the matter. Meanwhile, Zhan Wu had also stopped in time, preventing the situation from escalating further. Back then, Donghuang had humiliated him in every possible way. The fall of the 14 primordial spirit gods was also planned by Donghuang. This time, Zhan Wu had returned and destroyed Donghuang's realm. This was considered an explanation to the heavenly Tao of the divine wilderness on behalf of Qin Hao, the supreme god. The only pity was that he did not manage to kill Donghuang. Zhan Wu had returned to the untainted land and forged a perfect heaven wheel. The secret of the divine wilderness continent's original realm could not be kept for long. Especially since Donghuang was not dead, it would definitely cause serious trouble. However, Zhan Wu could not charge into the Radiant Divine Realm because of this. Now, the Radiant King and the Empty God must have learned the secret of the Divine Wilderness original realm from Donghuang. Although Zhan Wu was worried about this, he was not too worried because he still had the War God King to rely on. The War God City was a branch of the War God King's bloodline. Previously, Zhan Wu had not been able to forge a perfect heaven wheel. Now, he was different from before. His status in the clan had definitely risen. However, he did not abandon the Sword Realm and return to the Archean Realm. He still needed to find Qin Hao's whereabouts. They had agreed to return together. The War God City did not force Zhan Wu and allowed him to stay in the outside world. However, the War God King had sent 2 divine generals and a divine guard army from the divine realm to be stationed in the Great Tao Sword Realm. This could be considered a message from the War God clan to the Untainted Land. They would not allow anyone to touch Zhan Wu. Jun Mo had been defeated several times in the Massacre World. Later, he made a trip to the Great Tao Sword Realm and met Zhan Wu. At that time, neither of them spoke. They floated in midair and looked at each other calmly. Then, Jun Mo left with a cold smile. Now, it would not be easy for him to touch the Sword Realm again. Previously, Tianwu deity had set up a boundary marker here. Behind, the War God King had sent a divine guard army to be stationed. The Great Tao Sword Realm seemed to be protected by a pair of strong palms. Even the divine realm of Tianzhao could not pry open these palms. Just like this, there was peace for many years. Neither the Radiant Domain nor the divine realm of Tianzhao found trouble with the Great Tao Sword Realm. However, behind the scenes, the Radiant Domain, the divine realm of Tianzhao, and even the Great Tao Sword Realm secretly sent out a group of elite Heaven Wheel cultivators to investigate the Untainted Land. They all seemed to want to find one person. However, this common goal of theirs was now living in seclusion in the Nether Realm, the world of slaughter. At this time, on Azura Peak, Qin Hao was listening to Ji Xiang's preaching in the Azura Palace. He was still unaware of the changes in the outside world. Zhan Wu was a wild and aggressive person. If Qin Hao knew that he had destroyed the Donghuang realm, he would definitely have stopped him at that time. During these past few years, you've attained some level of mastery in reversing the divine Tao laws, but it's far from enough. Actually, under most circumstances, the so-called mastery and perfection of a divine technique are based on one's cultivation. The higher your cultivation, the imperceptible improvement in your control of divine techniques. Ji Xiang's voice revealed a sense of open-minded wisdom. It was as if he could see through everything at a glance. Qin Hao nodded seriously. He agreed with Ji Xiang's point of view. Although the strength of one's cultivation level could not change the quality of a technique, it could change its power. Sometimes, the increase in power could also be seen as a qualitative improvement. To put it bluntly, Qin Hao's cultivation was deep enough. He could even reverse the laws of the godly master realm. Unfortunately, his cultivation level was low. No matter how outstanding his evil power was, when faced with Tianlun, who was far stronger than his cultivation level, he still felt powerless when he released it. Under the suppression of his opponent's cultivation level, his evil power even lost its effect. Well, there is nothing to teach you. The cultivation of the massacre path focuses on killing nature. The stronger your killing nature, the stronger your massacre path will be. Supplemented by divine techniques or the spear path, it will increase your battle strength. You have been in Azura Peak for so long. What you should understand and what I should teach you, I will teach you. The most important thing is still up to you. Ji revealed a look of admiration. Qin Hao slowly stood up and bowed to Ji. This subordinate thanks the godly master for his guidance. This bow was from the bottom of Qin Hao's heart. Up until now, he still couldn't see through what kind of great god Azura was, but the benefits he received were real. If not for Azura's continuous training, guidance, and care, Qin Hao wouldn't have been able to see through him. If that was the case, then Qin Hao definitely wouldn't have the current situation. At least when he met Mu Zhan again, he would have the confidence to say that he was also a member of the slaughtering world. Qin Hao's massacre path wasn't any weaker than Mu Zhan's. Perhaps he had already surpassed him by a lot. In comparison, Azura Peak's Ruo Chu was more like a god of the massacre world than Sword World's Mu Zhan. Ji admired Qin Hao very much. He could feel that this little god, with a shallow cultivation level, had extremely high comprehension. If he was really a creature born from the massacre world, Azura might have wholeheartedly nurtured him with all his might. Teaching him as a disciple wasn't bad. It was a pity that Qin Hao wasn't the one who killed world gods. Everything Azura had done for Qin Hao was merely to obtain the Ember's earth god energy in his body. 1. A tremor came from an extremely distant place outside the deity world. Ji raised his head slightly. His gaze pierced through the dusky Azura palace, as though he saw something beyond the heavenly path. He revealed a cold but polite smile. "What's wrong, Godmaster?" asked Qin Hao. "Something that shouldn't have come has come again." Ji stood up and said, "Let's go. Let's see what tricks Tian Zhao, Godly King's servant, has up his sleeve." Tian Zhao, Godly King? Qin Hao narrowed his eyes, and a glint flashed through his eyes. Then he turned around and followed Ji Xiang out of the Azura Palace with Slayer. "Under the orders of Prince God Jun Mo, I'm here to deliver a message to Azura Godmaster. Prince God captured a group of remnants of Sword World not long ago. At Ghost Godmaster's invitation, he's holding a sword tasting competition in Ghost Domain. He's here to invite Azura Godmaster to watch." Stepping out of the Azura Palace, he raised his head and saw a resplendent figure floating in the sky. It was Jun Mo's constant companion, Godmaster Fervormight. Remnants of Sword World? Qin Hao looked up at Godmaster Fervormight, his fists clenched tightly. Jun Mo had captured a group of remnants of Sword World. Who could it be? His Highness Jun Mo is in such a good mood that he still remembers me. Ji smiled at Fen Wei. He had invited Fen Wei to watch the sword-tasting competition in the Demon's Domain. His true target was probably someone else. Haha, Ghost Path of Ghost Path is very interesting. I wonder which side will be more powerful when the sword cultivators of Sword World meet the path of Ghosts. The scene should be very interesting. Azura God, please don't disappoint His Highness Jun Mo's good intentions, said Godmaster Fervormight. Good intentions or bad intentions, I don't know. However, didn't Slayer warn you that Azura Peak isn't a place where anyone can come? Besides, I hate it when other things stand above my head. Ji was still smiling, but at this moment, beside him, the Slayer's eyes darkened. His black hair fluttered even though there was no wind. As he raised his arms, countless terrifying divine slaughtering spears appeared. Each of them was sharp and powerful. As the Slayer's finger pointed upwards, he spat out a word, "Go!" Swoosh! Swoosh! The divine spear of slaughter pierced through the air, accompanied by Fen Wei's panicked screams. Even though he managed to dodge a large number of divine spears, his arm was still pierced through by one of the divine spears. In an instant, Fen Wei's entire arm exploded and blood splattered everywhere. Drops of divine blood fell to the ground, but before they could land on the ground, they were all devoured by the black-robed divine guards on the Azura Peak. They screamed excitedly at the injured Fen Wei. Azura, you! God Lord Fervor Might clutched his severed arm with one hand. His face was red from the pain, and veins were bulging on his forehead. Just before Slayer launched his second attack, God Lord Fervor Might turned around and flew out of the heavenly law. His arm had been severed by the law of massacre, and he would never be able to regrow it. He had only come to deliver a message. He had never thought that he would lose an arm. Qin Hao silently glanced at Ji Xiang and Slayer. While he was delighted, he couldn't help but think that Ji Xiang was ruthless. Fervor Might could be considered unlucky. What a forgetful thing. Slayer stared in the direction Fervor Might had fled. If he chased after him, he was 100% sure that Fervor Might wouldn't be able to escape. In the end, he is still a servant of a god king. Sigh. I can't afford to offend him. Ji Xiang shook his head and sighed. He turned around and returned to Azura Palace. Qin Hao stood on the spot, feeling conflicted. Jun Mo had sent Fervor Might to deliver a message. On the surface, it looked like he was inviting God Lord Azura, but in reality, he was targeting him. It was obvious that Jun Mo still believed that Qin Hao remained in the god realm of massacre. That was why he had captured the cultivators of Sword World and sent them to Ghost Domain. His goal was clear. He wanted to force Qin Hao to show himself. Should I save him or not? Qin Hao was caught in a dilemma. For the past few decades, he had walked on the edge of a knife in the god realm of massacre. It wasn't easy for him to gain a foothold there. If he didn't save him, then he would never expose his identity. However, his life was exchanged for by the tens of thousands of sword cultivators of Sword World. If he was afraid of death, then the six Doyens, Avicii, Daisakong, the Venerable Immortal, and Blind Sword, could have just left Qin Hao alone. Even if God King Tianzhao was Sword World's mortal enemy, God Lord Avicii and the others were unaware of the war before it broke out. Even when they were unaware, they still chose to protect Qin Hao, not save him. Would they be able to face their Dao heart? Would they be able to face the blood that had been spilled in the Avicii divine domain and the tens of thousands of floating corpses that had been separated from the Avicii heavenly Dao? Creak. Qin Hao clenched his fists tighter and tighter. He had never been to Ghost Domain, but he had fought Ghost Domain. The power of Ghost resentment was terrifying. Even he had fallen for it the first time. It was enough to imagine what would have happened to the sword cultivators that Jun Mo had captured if Qin Hao hadn't helped. The way of the sword should be indomitable. Taking a deep breath, Qin Hao recalled the words of many seniors of the way of the sword. He looked at the gloomy Azura Palace and then walked into the palace. Save. It didn't matter if they were Lu Qiu, Long Miao, Loi, the Academy's disciples, or just ordinary sword cultivators of Sword World. He had to save them. However, he didn't have to expose his identity to save them. Chapter 2183. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Jun Mo captured the swordsman and brought him to Ghost Domain. Jun Mo seemed to have guessed that if Qin Hao was still alive, regardless of whether he had Shura's help or not, the two of them must be very close. Then, the two of them must be very close. They might even be hiding in Azura Peak. Today, Fen Wei had sent a message. Jun Mo believed that with Qin Hao's character, he would definitely come to Ghost Domain to save him. Now that he had returned to Shura Palace, Qin Hao was thinking of a solution. He had two options to save the swordsman from Sword World. One was to reveal his identity and charge in a Ghost Domain in front of Jun Mo and Ghost Godmaster. If he did that, not only would he not be able to save the swordsman, but even Shura Peak might not be able to leave. The other option was to take advantage of the situation. Didn't Jun Mo invite Shura to watch the battle? Then Qin Hao would start from this point and persuade Shura to go personally. He would use the identity of a Shura guard. As long as he arrived at Ghost Domain, he would be able to act freely. He might give himself away, or at least arouse Jun Mo's suspicion. Qin Hao had no other choice because he owed Sword World. He had to save them. God Master. Qin Hao bowed to Ji Xiang. Why didn't you go back to practice? Shura asked. Tianzhao Godly King's men invited you to Ghost Domain. I wonder how you will respond, Qin Hao said. Didn't I respond to them? Ji Xiang smiled at Qin Hao. Funwei returned with a broken arm as a response to Junimo. As for going to Ghost Domain, the swordsman's life and death had nothing to do with Shura. He was too lazy to go. These are not for you to ask. Leave, Slayer muttered. Qin Hao's talent was not bad, and he was deeply appreciated by Godmaster. However, he should not forget his identity as a mere guard. Whether Shura went or not, there was no need to explain to Qin Hao. Lord Slayer, Divine Lord, I just feel that Junimo is deliberately provoking the massacre world. If we don't go, won't he look down on us and think that Divine Lord is a coward? Qin Hao said. How dare you? The Slayer shouted. Zhixiang waved his hand and said, What do you think? Go. Qin Hao answered decisively. It's just a show. Why wouldn't we go? The battle between the Ghost Dao and the Sword Dao won't affect our world of slaughter. What is there to fear? Ruo Chu, this isn't just a simple show. There are many things involved. Listen to me and go back to cultivate. Don't interfere with the lives of those swordsmen, Zhixiang said with a hint of persuasion. Divine Lord, your subordinate has been cultivating diligently by your side. Now, I could be considered to have made some small achievements. Some time ago, when I fought with the Ghost Path, I was not satisfied. I want to go to the Ghost Domain and have a deep understanding of the essence of the Ghost Path, Qin Hao requested. You don't know the difference between life and death, the Slayer sneered. Go back and do your job as a Divine Guard. Your goal now is to constantly improve and reverse the Divine Path. Don't bother with the things that the outer realm doesn't believe in. Zhixiang waved his hand and signaled Qin Hao to leave. Divine Lord, Qin Hao raised his head. A hint of urgency flashed in the depths of his eyes. Don't you understand? Zhixiang's expression darkened. He shed his elegance and replaced it with the dignity of a divine lord. His gaze made people not dare to look directly at him. Qin Hao stood quietly in place. At this moment, his heart was beating very fast. Through Shura's gaze, he suddenly realized that his identity might have been exposed long ago. It was just that Shura and the Slayer did not expose him. Now, the Divine Lord had ordered him to go back and do his job as a little Divine Guard. Wasn't his purpose to persuade him to stop? Obviously, Shura knew that once Qin Hao went to the Ghost Domain, no matter what method he used to save the people of the Sword World, it would arouse Junmo's suspicion. As a result, the consequences would be unpredictable. Yes, finally, Qin Hao faced Shura's dignified gaze and lowered his head. It wasn't that he was afraid of death and didn't want to save them. It was just that there was a Shura god in front of him. If Shura didn't let him go, there was no way he could leave the Shura Peak. Roar. In the dim Shura Palace, a beast-like roar seemed to come from the depths of the dim Shura Palace. Wait. Zhixiang saw Qin Hao silently turn around and immediately stopped him. What orders do you have, Divine Lord? Qin Hao stopped and turned back. He slightly bowed and said, You really want to go? Zhixiang asked. Qin Hao's body trembled slightly. He raised his head and his gaze was unusually firm. Yes. You're right. Since my red-robed Divine Guards want to enter the Ghost Domain to experience the Ghost Dao, then I'll make an exception this time and bring you new Heavenly Wheel experts to broaden your horizons. Zhixiang's dignified aura dissipated and an elegant smile appeared on his face. Qin Hao was very surprised. Thank you, Divine Lord. Go back and tell MO2 to get ready. Later, the four of you will come with me to the Ghost Domain. But there is one thing you must remember. When you arrive at the Ghost Domain, without my order, you can't even say a word or do anything unnecessary. Do you understand? Zhixiang said the last four words with a pause. I understand. Qin Hao let out a sigh of relief in his heart. He turned around and quickly left for MO2 Palace. Master, Slayer looked at Qin Hao's back and seemed to have something to say. Zhixiang raised his hand to interrupt Slayer. The corner of his mouth curved into a faint smile. He knew what Slayer wanted to say. If they had only suspected before, then from now on, it was enough to completely conclude that Qin Hao was the Sword World's fugitive who hid in the Slaughter World. It was a pity that after staying in the Slaughter World for so many years, no matter how Shura guided, nurtured, and taught him, he still could not eradicate Qin Hao's previous Tao. He still retained a trace of sensibility that was very laughable in the slaughter world. Jun Mo, this little thing, not only does he have a strong background and strong talent, he is also good at scheming. This time, when Ruo Chu goes over, it is inevitable that something will go wrong. Ji Xiang raised his head slightly and looked at the gloomy palace. Just now, Ben Xiang had told him to bring Qin out of the ghost domain. He understood Ben Xiang's thoughts. He was preparing to speed up the pace of opening the Hell King's gate. Qin Hao was actually quite pitiful. The sword world was destroyed, and Jun Mo pursued him relentlessly. He narrowly escaped death and came to the slaughter world. He thought that he could secretly go somewhere else and steal a period of peace. But in reality, the slaughter world was not a good place to stay. The reason why Shura worked so hard to nurture him was because he had ulterior motives. Now, Qin Hao could not avoid the fate of being exposed. Then, before he was exposed, Shura would be kind and fulfill some of his wishes, such as saving the sword cultivators. After all, after this trip, Qin Hao would lose the value of being nurtured. When he opened the Hell King's gate, he would be walking towards the end of his life. Qin Hao returned to Mo2 Palace and repeated the God Master's instructions. Very quickly, Mo2 called back Jia Kong, Ing Luo, and Hidden Ghost. He brought Qin Hao and the rest back to Shura's side. Ji Xiang and Slayer were also prepared. They gathered over 100 god generals and red-clothed elites. The team rose from Shura Peak and headed towards the ghost domain. This trip was destined to be extraordinary. Jun Mo wanted to force Qin Hao out. Shura was willing to bring him over. His goal was to help Qin Hao fulfill some insignificant wishes before he died. As for Qin Hao himself, he simply wanted to save the sword world cultivators. He knew it would arouse Jun Mo's suspicion and even expose himself, but he had no choice. At least, Shura had already seen through him. Qin Hao could feel it from the conversation just now. But since Shura did not expose him, Qin Hao continued to pretend to be a Shura guard. He still did not know what Shura's goal was, but it was better to be on his side than to be his enemy. And now, he could only rely on the massacre world. In the vast wilderness, he could not find any other power he could rely on. The seniors he could rely on were all gone. The massacre world cultivators have always been fearless. Last time, Ruo Chu fell into the ghost path. I hope that today, you will not disappoint me. Along the way, Ji Xiang passed the message to Jia Kong and the rest. The creatures of the massacre world were born pure. They only knew how to kill. The reason why Qin Hao fell into the ghost path was because his killing nature was not pure. On the other hand, Jia Kong and the rest were different. Other than respect for Shura, there was almost no fear in this world. We will not disgrace the name of the massacre world, Jia Kong and the rest said in unison. Their eyes were filled with eagerness. Previously, they had also heard that Qin Hao had defeated the Netherworld Path, the Nether Demon Path, and the Ghost Path at the same time. This made Jia Kong and the rest envious. At the same time, there was a hint of dissatisfaction. It was as if they could also defeat the Ghost Path and the Netherworld Path. Ruo Chu, before we came, do you still remember what I warned you? Ji Xiang glanced at Qin Hao. Qin Hao nodded and said, I remember. Very good. Then let me tell you something else. On the path of cultivation, other than yourself, do not trust anyone, especially the massacre world, the Netherworld Path, the Nether Demon Path, and the Ghost Path. Ji Xiang moved closer to Qin Hao and said in a low voice, if not, you will die very, very miserably. I will remember. Qin Hao heard Azura's tone and felt an inexplicable chill. The team continued to move forward. This piece of wilderness was once a whole, the Underworld King's domain. Because of the fall of the Underworld God King and the collapse of the Heavenly Path, it was split into 4. Although the Underworld King's domain was split into 4 parts, the nature of the Heavenly Path was still very similar to each other. This also caused the living beings of the 4 realms to be basically unaffected by each other's realm power. This was because their origins were the same. The massacre world was not far from the ghost domain. It was far from a distance between the Heaven's Door domain and the Great Path Sword realm. Moreover, The Slayer's strength was much stronger than Ziyine's. With the Slayer's divine power, it did not take long for the team to descend on the Ghost Domain. They landed directly at the core of the Ghost Domain, the Ghost's Nest. Looking at the bleak world and feeling the strong power of death and resentment in the heavenly path, it seemed to be filled with all kinds of curses. The entire heavenly path was intertwined with curses. Qin Hao suddenly thought of something. He was very curious. Why had he not seen the Azura Divine Lord reveal the slightest hint of the massacre will of the way on this journey? Even when he was in Azura Peak before, everything was basically done by the Slayers. Qin Hao only then remembered what the Wu God had said. A long, long time ago, it seemed that Azura had suffered a very serious injury. Then, was the Azura Divine Lord beside him really Azura himself? Also, who had let out the beast-like roar that Qin Hao had heard in the Azura Palace? Qin Hao did not have the time to ponder too much. Soon after, several extremely powerful auras appeared in front of him. Qin Hao looked over and saw a huge building below that was piled up with flesh and bones. Several powerful lineups were standing in this place that could barely be called a dojo. At first glance, Qin Hao stared at Jun Emo. Jun Emo had not brought many people with him this time, but there was still Shangji among the protectors. For this reason alone, Qin Hao dismissed the idea of killing Jun Emo in the Ghost Domain. In addition, there were 3 figures with extraordinary temperaments sitting in the dojo. None of them was inferior to Shangji in terms of aura. Judging from the auras of the battle with the Golden Skeleton, the Shadow Ghost, and the Evil Ghost last time, Qin Hao had accurately analyzed the identities of these 3 people. On the left was a burly middle-aged man who should be the Divine Lord of the Netherworld. He was extremely tall and sat there, but his body seemed to be even fiercer than MO2's. Probably only the Dragon Master's bloated body could compare to him. On the right was a feminine and strangely beautiful young man. His facial features were even more exquisite than a woman's, and he exuded extremely powerful soul power. This was clearly the Divine Lord of the Netherworld. As the host, the Divine Lord of the Ghost Domain, Gui Di, sat in the middle. His appearance was very normal. Although he was ordinary, he was not as ugly and deformed as the evil ghost that Qin Hao had seen. Qin Hao knew that the 3 Divine Lords had used their divine power to change their appearances so that they looked like ordinary people. In fact, once they were engaged in battle, they would revert to their original forms. Perhaps at that moment, these 3 terrifying existences would be more terrifying than the Golden Skeleton, the Shadow Ghost, and the evil ghost that Qin Hao had faced. Your Royal Highness, you're quite influential to have gathered my 3 elder brothers. Zhixiang's smile grew warmer and warmer as he landed with the Ashura Divine Guards. At the same time, the extremely tall Divine Lord of the Netherworld, the Divine Lord of the Netherworld, who was more beautiful than a woman, and the plain-looking Gay D rose from their seats one after another and went up to Zhixiang. Time seemed to freeze as the 4 of them looked at each other. Once, the 4 of them had been brothers, and they also had a younger sister. The 5 of them had lived together in that place called the Underworld. Chapter 2184. 114 Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Fear defeats fear that Underworld God King had fallen. The heavenly Tao had collapsed, and the divine realm had been split into 4. Azura, Nether, Umo, and Gui Di had each swallowed a part of their family and become the masters of their respective realms. Looking at Zhixiang, they knew that this was not Azura's true body, but only one side of Azura, which was Xiangdao. Azura's divine soul had been scattered by the Light King and could not be reunited. Although Zhixiang was not his true body, he was part of Azura and could represent his true body. 4th brother, it's been a long time, God Lord Nether said. It has indeed been a long time. Zhixiang's expression was calm. The last time they had gathered was when the Light King had fought. In that battle, they had lost many precious things, their complete family, and their little sister. After the battle, they would occasionally meet in private, but they had never gathered again. Today was an exception. Take a seat. Guedi sighed. An invisible wisp of sadness lingered around the four of them. Azura and his little sister were the youngest among the 5 siblings. Because they had taken too much of the underworld god king's love, they were jealous of Azura and hated him. But now was different. There was no underworld and no underworld god king. Brothers, please. Azura was the first to decline. Compared to the 3 god lords, his status was the lowest. Nether and the others nodded, returned to their original seats, and sat down quietly. Ji Xiang sat in the middle of the 4. The 4 brothers had gathered at Junmo's invitation, and he was somewhat emotional. However, he did not believe that Nether and Umo would do Junmo a favor and attend the meeting. They must have received something from him. Haha, it's truly magnificent. God Lord Nether, God Lord Umo, God Lord Ghost, and God Lord Azura are gathered together. I can vaguely see the underworld's former glory, Junimo said with a smile. Unfortunately, the underworld had been defeated. After losing the underworld god king, the underworld was no longer a force on the same level as the divine realm. However, even though the radiant realm had won that battle, they had paid an extremely heavy price. The old radiant king and the underworld god king had both perished, and the entire radiant realm had suffered a great loss. If it wasn't for the fact that the light eldest son had comprehended the divine king Dao and supported the family business of the divine king faction, the current situation would definitely not be much better than Shura and the others. There was an 80% chance that the light region would have been divided up by the divine princes and become independent. This was a battle between deity kings. Once it started, there was almost no winner. With 2 innate deity kings dead, the Great Xia Empire would crumble overnight. Therefore, unless there was no other choice, the divine king forces would not easily engage in a war of annihilation. The light region and the nether region were living examples. Too many people had died, including a few divine princes of light. Azura's younger sister had also died. Didn't His Highness Junmo capture some sword cultivators to test the power of this seat's ghost Dao? Hurry up, we're all very busy. Guedi's plain face and tone had no patience. Because Junmo had given him some things, he had reluctantly been generous for once, allowing Tianlun of Heavenly Imperial Divine Desire to be a temporary guest at the Ghost Lair and compete with a few insignificant sword cultivators. Huang Quan and Umo also had no interest in this. The deity Lord Sure, are impatient, all right. Junmo knew that touching the nether region scar would displease them, so he said, "Bring those sword cultivators up." Immediately, behind the Heavenly Imperial Divine Soldier, 8 to 9 men and women in ragged clothes were escorted by Junmo's divine guards. They all had divine halos in their hands as they dragged their heavy footsteps into the center of the Ghost Lair Dao field. Instantly, Qin Hao's heart tightened, and he glanced over. These sword cultivators of various ages and divine Dao auras that weren't strong in the slightest had obviously experienced a great deal of vicious beatings and had been ravaged for a long time. All of their tattered clothes had dried bloodstains remaining on them, and their disheveled appearances were extremely dispirited. They are not Lu Qiu and Long Miao's people, nor are they the Academy's disciples. Qin Hao breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't know any of these sword cultivators. He was afraid that he would see Lu Qiu, Long Miao, or Wukan Loi when he came over. However, there were so many sword cultivators in the sword realm of the Great Path, and there were hundreds of subordinate planes of the infinite divine realm. Qin Hao couldn't possibly know all of them. On the day of the battle in the infinite divine realm, it was those countless people he didn't know who fought a bloody battle to open a path for him. Even Qin Hao didn't know how many people had died. Although the sword cultivators that Junmo had brought today were not Lu Qiu and Long Miao, he still had to save them. At the very least, Qin Hao could feel the sword intent from these people. Among them, the weak have 10,000 years of cultivation, while the strong have 30,000 years. It is said that the Ghost God Lord's ghost path is very unique. It can ignite the fear in the depths of people's hearts and then be swallowed by fear. I would like to see it. Junimo smiled with great interest. Oomph. Only one of them has 30,000 years of immortal path. The rest are all trash. Guadi's eyes flashed with a faint light, and he could sense it with a sweep of his mind. With such a weak lineup, he could just send 2 ghost god guards to kill them all in half a cup of tea's time. What sword-tasting competition? There was no sense of anticipation at all. Senior. In the center of the ghost nest training hall, a young sword cultivator with a wounded face looked around the entire hall in fear. He was suffocated by the aura of the many immortal masters here. The other young men and women also moved closer to the oldest sword cultivator, as if this would give them a sense of security. Now that things have come to this, there is nothing to be afraid of. The old sword cultivator's breath was very weak as he comforted the juniors beside him. If he was destined to die, the only thing he could do was die in front of these juniors. Unlock them, Junimo ordered. With a faint sweep of his palm, divine light spread out, and the halo shackles binding the hands of this group of sword cultivators suddenly disappeared. Guadi lazily glanced at them and remained silent, unwilling to speak. Let the 2 of you go and experience their sword Tao. At this time, behind Guadi, a ghost general spoke and casually picked 2 from the dense crowd of ghost god guards. Yes, the 2 ghost god guards accepted the order. The corners of their mouths outlined a malicious smile, and their bloodthirsty tongues licked the corners of their mouths. At the same time, they walked towards the sword cultivators. Their eyes were especially fixed on the female sword cultivators, as if their souls were more delicious. The remnants of Sword World, listen well. If you win against the Ghost Tao, this palace will be merciful and let you go. Otherwise, Junimo sneered. This was the territory of evil spirits, so there was no need to say more. Only sending 2? You are looking down on us too much. A bold sword cultivator showed anger. Be careful. They're the divine guards of the Ghost God Lord. Their strength cannot be underestimated. The old sword cultivator stretched out his arms and made a gesture of protecting the juniors. Among these people, none of them had encountered the Ghost Tao. A long time ago, it was said that the Ghost Tao was extremely evil, and evil spirits often came out of the Ghost region and went to other divine realms to kill creatures. Later, Ancestor Qinghua of the Archean world came to the Ghost region to frighten Guadi and ordered him to control the evil spirits. Otherwise, under Qinghua Mountain, the Ghost Tao did not exist. Under the deterrence of Ancestor Qinghua, the Ghost region was much more obedient. In the Untainted Land, it was said that the Ghost region attached itself to Qinghua Mountain and was strictly controlled. But today, Ancestor Qinghua obviously would not show up to save them. No one would risk offending Junimo to save the sword cultivators of Sword World. Qinghao looked at the increasingly tense Taoist sanctum. The 2 ghost guards kept pressuring the sword cultivators. He was very uneasy under his calm expression. These 2 ghost guards were not simple. It seemed that they were casually pointed out by Ghost General. But how could they let the sword cultivators live in front of so many divine masters, especially their own divine masters? Their strength should not be inferior to the evil spirits that Qinghao had fought before. Even if they were inferior, they should be inferior in terms of cultivation. Therefore, this group of sword cultivators had almost no chance of winning. Don't be nervous. We are all divine masters with 20,000 years of divine path. It's just 2 holy meridians. You can win against us, a tall ghost guard said with a sneer. At this time, his appearance was no different from that of a normal person. All the ghost guards in the ghost nest looked normal. 8 against 2. Are you ready now? Another thin ghost guard said in a hoarse voice. Regardless of whether the sword cultivators were ready or not, his withered body suddenly changed dramatically. Arms covered in ghostly tattoos burst out of their clothes and stretched out from different parts of their bodies. Their chests, stomachs, backs, heads, and even thighs were covered in deformed long arms. They were like a twisted mess that swept towards the sword cultivators. Every extended arm was wrapped in a strong, ghostly resentment. Boom! The head of the tall ghost guard suddenly exploded. His blood turned into a blood mist and swallowed the surroundings. His eyes fell to the ground and bounced off like two fleas. They landed on the faces of the two sword cultivators and instantly drilled into their eyes. At this moment, shrill screams shook the center of the Taoist sanctum. The two sword cultivators tore at their faces crazily. They scratched their faces until they were badly mutilated and screamed inhumanly. Ears, mouths, noses, these facial features fell on the sword cultivators. After they merged into their bodies, the sword cultivators heard voices that they should not have heard. They tasted flavors that they had never tasted before. They smelled scents that did not seem to exist in this world. The most terrifying scene was reflected in their consciousness through the ghost eyes. It was like purgatory. The sword cultivator who was possessed by the ear heard the call of his deceased father. When the tall ghost guard's mouth stuck to another sword cultivator's body, he felt as if he had swallowed countless pieces of rotten meat. It tasted like human flesh. Fear spread and engulfed their souls. It went straight to the depths of their hearts and dug out doors that had been closed due to fear. When the past that they did not want to face was opened, the torrent of fear turned into a curse that invaded the will of these sword cultivators and dragged them into the abyss. It was like the ghost hands that hung all over the thin ghost guard's body, tugging at their souls. There was no resistance to speak of. It was as if living had become a luxury. The fear brought by the ghost way made the sword cultivators only want to die. Death was the release of their souls. The 30,000-year-old sword cultivators, or other sword cultivators with one or two divine veins, no longer remembered who they were. Their sword will and swordsmanship had long been dispelled by fear. This was the result of encountering the ghost way for the first time. They could not find a chance to fight back. Their entire being had been swallowed up by the curse brought by fear. Dried blood seeped out of their tattered clothes again. The white skin of the female sword cultivators gradually split open. It was as if ghost hands had grown out of their flesh. The young sword cultivator who was possessed by the evil ghost's mouth stared with a deranged gaze. He bit at the old sword cultivator as if he had gone mad. As he bit, he screamed, "Meat, meat, meat." Do you want to hear the screams? The most beautiful sounds in the world. The sword cultivator who had been possessed by the evil ghost's ear and heard countless screams jumped onto the back of another person. His eyes turned white as he spoke terrifying words. However, he was very quiet as he told a story to the other person. He wanted to tell the other person everything he had heard with his ears and let them go to hell together. Madness, bloodthirstiness, killing each other, strange and bizarre scenes played out in the ghost nest field. This was a scene that could not be seen in a normal battle. Jun Mo, who had originally planned to lure out Qin Hao, was also seeing this for the first time. His mood was suddenly lifted. Immediately, he laughed out loud. Interesting, too interesting. He did not know how the two ghost guards did it, but the power of the ghost way was indeed evil. If possible, he even wanted to ask for some ghost guard from Gue Di and put them in the torture room of the heavenly Zhao divine domain. That way, when he had time, he could torture those who dare to be rude to him. It would not be a loss of pleasure. Creak! Qin Hao clenched his fists and stared at the center of the Dao field. This was not a battle, but a living purgatory. Looking at the miserable state of the sword cultivators, the person possessed by the mouth was about to gnaw off another person's face. The guy who was telling ghost stories used a calm tone to tell horrifying stories, torturing his companion until he hovered between life and death. The two of them were rolling on the ground at the same time. This was not a spar. It was no different from a massacre. If it was a direct battle, the 8 sword cultivators might have a slight chance of victory, but under the power of the ghost resentment, they were simply not a match. In this situation, not to mention half a cup of tea, even in the next second, the 8 sword cultivators would completely go crazy and be swallowed up by the power of the 2 ghost guards' ghost resentment. If fear can be defeated, then it will be an even more powerful fear. Dong! Without any of the divine lords noticing, Qin Hao's feet shook and he directly jumped up from Azura's back, fiercely slamming into the center of the ghost nest Dao field. Rumble. The tyrannical strength of his feet caused the Dao field to collapse. With Qin Hao as the center, an area of 100 meters sank. A shocking scene, an earth-shattering sound wave wrapped in an evil aura spread out, affecting everyone in the Dao field. Whether it was the sword cultivators or Guadi's ghost guards, they all fell silent at the same time, their eyes looking at Qin Hao, who had stepped into the Dao field. Look, there are so many evil spirits. Chapter 2185. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. In the training hall, evil spirits flew around, some circling the heads of the sword cultivators, some hanging on Qin Hao's shoulders. Evil energy billowed, wailing, crazy laughter, all kinds of morbid sounds intertwined to form a unique movement, affecting everything in the training hall. The sword cultivators who were affected by the power of ghosts' resentment woke up. The two ghost guards who were busy casting curses were also stunned. Even the god masters who were watching the battle, as well as the god generals of the various god realms, all looked at Qin Hao. Jun Mo, who was full of excitement and appreciation, was also caught off guard by Qin Hao's sudden intrusion. His attention was suddenly focused, and only then did he remember the purpose of this trip to the ghost lair. He was not appreciating the ghost path, but to force out the hidden Qin Hao. Now, one person had appeared, but it was completely out of Jun Mo's expectations. Because of the previous battle with Shura Feng, he had completely eliminated this guy, full of evil energy. No matter how Qin Hao changed, it was absolutely impossible for him to become like this. But now, Jun Mo was shaken. His eyes were unusually sharp as he looked over, through the evil energy all over Qin Hao's body, as if he could see the essence of it. Ji Xiang's face flashed with a touch of displeasure. Before setting off from Shura Feng, he had especially warned Qin Hao not to act rashly without his orders. Now that Qin Hao had taken the initiative to stand out, his original plan was disrupted. He was very clear about Qin Hao's thoughts, to save the sword cultivators of the sword world. But it was not necessary for Qin Hao to save them. Shura could have sent other redcoats to confuse Jun Mo's guess, making it difficult for Jun Mo to distinguish between the real and the fake. In the end, Qin Hao had taken the initiative to stand out. Was this not directly telling Jun Mo that he was the target? What do you mean? Guadi was stunned for 2 breaths, looking at Ji Xiang. His ghost guard were sparring with the sword cultivators. What did Shura's god guard want to do by jumping in? Ji Xiang spread out his hands, indicating that he didn't understand either and wanted to hear Qin Hao's explanation. God Lord Guadi, Lord God Lords, this lowly god believes that this competition is meaningless and not worth watching at all. This is simply a one-sided slaughter. Qin Hao stood in the middle of the field and said in full view of the crowd, "Get lost." A repulsive-looking ghost general roared at Qin Hao. What did it have to do with the Shura guards whether or not there was any entertainment value? They were disturbing the ghost god lord's mood. Guadi raised his hand to stop Guadi. Let him continue. Thank you, God Lord Guadi. Qin Hao bowed slightly and said, I am Azura Feng, a newly promoted red-clothed godly guard. Not long ago, I had a taste of the ghost path, the bone path of godly Lord Netherworld, and the soul path of godly Lord Umo. The path of godly lords is unfathomably profound, and I am filled with admiration. Therefore, I would like to experience it again. Oh, Guadi dragged out his voice. Now he understood. Godly Lord Netherworld and godly Lord Umo subconsciously glanced at Ji Xiang. The 3 godly lords understood that the evil ghosts, skeletons, and ghosts that had been brought to Azura Feng by Ji Xiang and never returned had died at the hands of the Shura guard. And this lowly godly guard seemed to be highly valued by Azura. Pure one-sided slaughter and an evenly matched battle are definitely not as entertaining as the latter. So this lowly god has a suggestion. Let Azura Feng godly guards challenge the ghost path. Whoever wins can control the life and death of the swordsmen and decide their fates. I wonder if God Lord Guadi could give this lowly god a chance to learn from the ghost path. Qin Hao looked at Godly Lord Netherworld and Godly Lord Yumobone Godly Guards, and Soul Godly Guard can participate as well. The Azura Phone Godly Guards challenged the ghost path, and the winner would have the right to control the swordsman. This was not a bad idea, at least in Guadi's opinion. Azura's Godly Guards were much stronger than this group of trash swordsmen. They had the qualifications to challenge his ghost path, and the battle would be very exciting. Not a bad idea. I have no objections. What does Your Highness Jun Mo think? Guadi asked for Junmo's opinion. After all, the swordsman had been brought here by him. Jun Mo paused, his eyes fixed on Qin Hao. He gritted his teeth and said, "Naturally, I would be happy to see this." Qin Hao's current appearance was completely different from before, and his godly path ability had also changed. Jun Mo could not be sure whether this was Qin Hao himself, but now he could at least confirm one thing. Even if this guy covered in evil energy was not Qin Hao, the two were definitely related. What about fourth brother? Guadi looked at Ji Xiang. My godly guards have already stepped forward. Can I say no? Ji Xiang's tone was dissatisfied, but he immediately smiled. Since everyone is in such a good mood, I will naturally help. Big brother and third brother can also send bone guards and soul guards to spar. Then forget it, Netherworld Godly Lord said. He was not interested. Just enjoy the battle between the Azura guards and the ghost path. It just so happens that I can see with my own eyes how different the little godly guards that fourth brother relies on so much are. Yumo Lord's tone seemed to be filled with deep resentment. After all, one of his elites from the Yumo realm had died at the hands of Qin Hao. In that case, let's begin. My ghost path will spar with you. Guadi's ordinary face was filled with a few traces of seriousness. He pointed at Qin Hao and said, "However, with your talent and strength, my two ghost path guards are definitely not your match. I will need to increase the number of participants." Guadi knew that Wu Xiang had also taken an elite from Netherworld Godly Lord and Yumo Godly Lord side. Those were all good seedlings with immortal grade heavenly wheels. 3 immortal grade heavenly wheels with 3 divine marks. If they could not win against Qin Hao, how could the 2 little ghost path guards with 2 divine veins be a match for Qin Hao? Therefore, he needed to send more up. Okay, Ji Xiang spoke first, not allowing Qin Hao to answer. Because Ji Xiang was very unhappy. Even if he sent a ghost general, he would not have any objections. Trying to be brave? Then he would have to pay the price. Especially when Qin Hao disobeyed his orders. Okay, Qin Hao secretly clenched his fists. He knew that this would be a tough battle. Since Guadi dared to say so, the lineup he sent would not be any weaker than the one at Motu Palace. Next, Ghost God Lord's gaze swept over the ghost path guards on the side, especially staring at a few. Then, among the ghost path guards, 5 brave and strong men stepped out of the formation. Their auras were abnormally rough. They lined up in a row and pressed down on Qin Hao. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 2 little ghost path guards who had entered first quickly retreated, retracting the ghost resentment force planted in the sword cultivator's body. The long hands, covered with ghost patterns, retracted back into their bodies. The guy whose head had exploded regenerated his head as the blood coagulated. He picked up the scattered ears and eyeballs on the ground and ran away in a hurry, as if he was running away. The ranks of the Shura guards on Azura Peak were clear, from Black Robe and Red Robe to Godly Champion. The same was true for the Ghost Path guards of the Ghost Nest. The 2 little ghosts could not be compared to the 5 fierce ghosts. Any one of them could easily tear them apart. Your Highness, something interesting is about to begin. Shanji put on a fake smile and secretly sent a message to Jun Mo. Let's wait and see. Jun Mo sneered in response. You guys come on my side. Qin Hao glanced at the 8 sword cultivators with a cold face. The 8 sword cultivators on the ground were still in a state of shock. They had just struggled out of the gate of Ghost when another 5, even more ferocious ghosts came. Although Qin Hao didn't look like a good person, After experiencing the viciousness of the ghost grudge, the sword cultivators very cleverly got up and hid behind Qin Hao. They were the prey in the field. Whether the Shura path or the ghost path won, they would not have a good ending. Little Shura Gargod, are you ready? Gui Di gave Qin Hao enough time. 1 against 5. Please advise me, ghost path. The moment Qin Hao decided to step into the training hall, he was already ready to face everything. Buzz, buzz. 5 powerful wheels radiated in front of him, and the strong power of ghost resentment condensed into huge ghost spirits that roared and hovered in the air. The 5 fierce ghosts all had immortal-grade heavenly wheels, and their bodies had undergone an earth-shattering change. At this time, the fierce ghost in the middle turned into a pool of blood on the ground. It did not have a body. This pool of dirty blood on the ground quickly flowed toward Qin Hao, making dense ghost spirit cries along the way. It was as if thousands of evil ghosts had gathered and swept along Qin Hao's legs to his entire body. The blood seeped into the evil force and drilled into Qin Hao's skin, trying to invade his internal organs and occupy his spirit. Immortal grade, 3 veins. It was not the first time Qin Hao felt the power of the ghost path for 30,000 years. In the Motu Palace, his first encounter with the ghost path gave him a deep experience. At this moment, encountering the same level of ghost force again, at least he was not so passive. The dirty blood contained an extremely strong ghost curse, like countless strange runes stuck on the skin. At this moment, Qin Hao was overwhelmed by fear, as if he had fallen into a boundless sea of blood. Around him were corpses that had died tragically. Countless ghost hands began to tear at him, trying to pull him to the bottom of the sea of blood, never to rise again. The wheels on Qin Hao's body lit up. The evil light radiated to the 9 heavens. The great Tao became one, forming its own universe like a perfect heavenly Tao. Ji Xiang, Slayer, Jun Mo, and Shang-Ji, although it was not the first time they had seen such a perfect heavenly wheel, they were still slightly moved, not to mention the Netherworld Divine Lord and the other 2. I see. Gui Di nodded silently. No wonder the ghost guard that was taken away by Wu Xiang did not come back. This little Azura Divine Guard had actually forged a perfect heavenly wheel. The ghost realm and the slaughter world were once part of the underworld. Why was the slaughter world able to produce a perfect heavenly wheel, but after the underworld war in the ghost realm, no other perfect heavenly wheel had appeared? As if suddenly thinking of something, Gui Di's eyes secretly glanced at Ji Xiang. A hint of sternness flashed through his eyes. Fourth brother was most likely hiding something important from him. In the training hall, Qin Hao had been infected by the will of the first fierce ghost. Blood stains almost covered his entire body, suppressing the evil light. However, in the instant that the perfect celestial wheel bloomed, the evil light under the bloodstains was like incomparably sharp spikes, piercing through. In an instant, the will of the ghost's resentment that was pressing down on his body was pierced full of holes, and the tainted blood instantly became bleak. With a wail, the bloodstains that covered Qin Hao's body began to recede. They returned to where they came from. They flowed down his legs to the ground, and then retracted back to their original position, condensing back into the tall, ferocious ghost. However, the situation of this fierce ghost was very bad. There were many holes all over his body, and broken internal organs were flowing out of the holes. It looked very disgusting because this was an injury. He was almost swallowed by Qin Hao's evil power. You let me win. Qin Hao's long hair fluttered, and countless evil spirits swayed behind him, letting out ear-piercing laughter, as if mocking the fierce ghost for overestimating himself. The first time he came into contact with the ghost realm, he was indeed caught off guard. However, because Yin Lao Bei had absorbed the deepest fear in Qin Hao's heart and imprisoned his most fragile weakness somewhere in his soul, he was now almost fearless. Just as Ji Xiang had said, the cultivators of the slaughter world had a single killing nature. They were fearless and fearless. In their eyes, there was only killing. Chapter 2186. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Tao of slaughter was pure, its killing intent was pure. It was as if it had a single thought and could not find a weakness to infiltrate. The advantage of Ghost Path, which was best at digging out fear, had lost its effect on Qin Hao. This was a simple test, and the result made the ghosts understand that it was difficult for them to win through Tao. Qin Hao had no fear, and it was even harder to fight him one-on-one. His Tianluan was perfect. The only way to win was to fight him head-on, and only by working together could they defeat him. 2 godly veins. I remember the first time I visited Azura Feng. This new Tianlun only had 1 godly vein, but in just a few decades he developed 20,000 years of godly path. I don't know what Azura God Master used to help him improve his cultivation. Jun Mo's eyes became sharper, and his laughter became colder. It seemed that his guess was right. This person was indeed related to Qin Hao. There's a refining pool in the back mountain of Azura Feng, formed by the power of the world and filled with endless Tao of slaughter, which gave birth to a strange effect. If His Highness Jun Mo enters the refining pool and doesn't die, he should be able to develop a godly vein after coming out. I don't know if His Highness is interested. Jixiang smiled and replied calmly. Is that so? Jun Mo and Jixiang looked at each other, as if they had seen through each other's lies. Jixiang's gaze fell on the training ground. He couldn't be bothered to explain too much. The refining pool had been nurtured by nature. It had been born with the birth of the Nether God King long before the Nether realm had been destroyed. Its effects were not inferior to a chaotic divine artifact. Let's go together. Guadi ordered. The perfect Tianluan with 2 godly veins was not a match for any ghost. Roar! For tall and burly ghosts moved at the same time. Their bodies were wrapped in ghost power, and they rushed towards Qin Hao with rumbling steps. The defeated ghost silently withdrew from the dojo. He had already lost and was embarrassed to continue fighting. This was not a life and death battle, but a friendly competition with Azura Godmaster subordinates. In a way, Ghost Guards and Azura Guards were compatriots. It was embarrassing to bully with numbers, and if they fought again after being defeated, wouldn't it be a joke to the Underworld world and Nether Devil world? At this time, Qin Hao saw the 4 fierce ghosts coming at him from all sides. The ghost Dao Tianluan was released to the extreme. The strong ghost resentment power made the space suffocate. Even if he was not affected by fear, the strength of the fierce ghosts was also very good. 4 immortal grade, 3 Meridian Tianluan joined forces, he still did not have the upper hand, and was even faintly at a disadvantage. Wonk. Around him, the godly slaughtering spears condensed together with the evil power. On each spear, there was an evil spirit hidden. Qin Hao stared at one of the evil spirits. With a sweep of his arm, several spears stabbed out at the same time. This battle must be fought quickly, and he must find a point to break through. He must not give the opponent a chance to waste time. That would only increase the variables. The evil spears pierced through the great Tao and instantly arrived in front of him. The evil spirits hiding in the spear light suddenly flew out and collectively pounced on a ghost. This ghost was invaded by the evil spirits, and his body was firmly entangled. He could not move for a moment. In a panic, the spear light pierced through, and a few bloody holes appeared on his majestic body. But these spears were not fatal. The ghost understood that Qin Hao was holding back. He roared unwillingly and turned to leave the dojo. At the same time, the attacks of the other 3 ghosts also blasted in front of Qin Hao. The twisted and knotted fist suddenly became bigger, like a mass of meat mountain smashing over. Qin Hao's figure retreated slightly. His eyes flashed, and a few rows of spear shadows appeared, turning into solid fences that rose up layer by layer and collided heavily with the falling meat mountain. The space shook crazily, and the meat flew in the air. The spear shadow fences were scattered, and the huge fist of the ghost pierced through the obstacles. It also became bloody. While it was in pain, it still did not give up and blasted towards Qin Hao's face. Qin Hao snorted, and the number of evil spirits swaying on his shoulders decreased. In the process, a few evil spirits were forcefully scattered by the other two ghosts. At this time, he stared at the ghost whose fist was injured. He grabbed the spear of massacre with his arm and stabbed it fiercely. It seemed to turn into several spear shadows, and it was difficult to distinguish which spear light was real. In other words, all the evil-killing power in the spear light was real. How is this possible? The ghost whose fist was injured had never seen such an exquisite spear technique. A spear with several styles, all fake and all real. How could there be someone in the world who could use the spear to such a terrifying extent? Pucci, the spear of massacre, pierced through the ghost fist. In the scream, the already injured ghost was nailed in the shoulder by Qin Hao's spear. The vigorous force pushed his tall body all the way back, and after knocking over dozens of ghost guards at the edge of the dojo, he rolled to Gui Di's feet. Gui Di was so angry that he lifted his foot and kicked the ghost out of the ghost nest. 5 against 1. In less than 10 breaths, 3 of them had been defeated. This kid's murderous nature is extremely fierce, and his spear technique is very skillful. It seems that his method is similar to MO2's. A ghost general's gaze silently swept towards Divine General MO2 standing behind Jixiang. MO2's spear strength was enough to rank in the top of the 4 realms of the wilderness. It seemed that he had received his guidance. In this battle, the chances of winning were very small. Gui Di naturally also understood that 5 against 1 was not enough. Now that it was 2 against 1, what chance did they have to win? Kid, your spear technique is very fierce. It is not possible to win against you. However, I have to leave something on your body. Among the remaining 2 evil ghosts, one of the ghost guards was bleeding more and more. Cracks were spreading crazily, and countless tendons extended out, as if they had turned into spiritual tentacles. They swept over and wrapped around Qin Hao's legs and arms, bringing with them a bloody wind. Roar! Taking advantage of this opportunity, the last ghost guard fell to the ground on all 4s and began to twitch wildly. As he shook, the flesh on his body began to fall off, and the scattered pieces of flesh attached to the tendons. Finally, the ghost guard's body disappeared, completely merging with the other ghost. Ghost power fusion technique? Qin Hao felt that the power wrapped around his arms and legs was very strong. Moreover, as the last ghost guard turned into a piece of flesh attached to another body, these tendons seemed to have become an indestructible body. They swung him high into the sky and smashed him down fiercely. It was incomparably brutal. Qin Hao's ears suddenly raged, and his body was completely out of control. He secretly thought that they were indeed the elites under Gui Di. With this move, the 2 ghosts were enough to create many miracles. One must know that the changes in battle were unpredictable, and being suddenly controlled in a moment of life and death was absolutely fatal. Fortunately, Qin Hao had the foresight to end the battle quickly, and swiftly kicked out the 3 ghost guards. Otherwise, he would be very uncomfortable now. At this time, under the control of his divine thoughts, the evil spirits in his body began to bite the tendons wrapped around his limbs. The 2 ghost guards' divine wheels were weaker than him, so it was not too difficult to destroy these tendons. Or perhaps it was because they were afraid of being punished if they lost the battle. The last 2 ghost guards became extremely tenacious after fusing with their divine power, greatly increasing the difficulty of the evil spirit decomposing the flesh and tendons. Just like what they said, at least they had to let Qin Hao leave something behind. Otherwise, wouldn't the 5 ghost guards lose face? Wouldn't Gui Di lose face? Then I'll go straight to the root of the problem. Evil Dragon Sea Turner. Being smashed to the ground might not hurt, let alone die, but it would be ugly to be flung around. Qin Hao was also a person who cared about his reputation. Instead of breaking down the tendons to escape, it would be better to directly attack the 2 ghost guards' bodies. At this moment, Qin Hao displayed the ultimate spear way that was honed thousands of times by the dragon spirit Dharma idol. Endless evil spirits flew out from his body and gathered into a 10,000 zhang long divine spear. Countless evil faces attached to the spear, and looking at it made one's scalp tingle. When he was in the Emperor realm, cloud dragons covered the sky and borrowed the power of the great Tao to descend from the sky, increasing the destructive power. Now that Qin Hao had stepped into the divine path and had a perfect divine wheel, when his divine thoughts radiated out, it could resonate with the power of the ghost domain realm. Therefore, this spear contained the might of the ghost domain realm and was extremely terrifying. The 10,000 zhang long spear shadow fell, and the endless evil spirits howled. Wrapped in the might of the heavens, an incomparably heavy pressure crushed into the divine souls. How could the two ghost guards, whose bodies had split open and turned into meatballs, withstand such power? They could feel a wisp of God, Lord Guaidi's power from the spear. This was simply an unbearable spear. Admit defeat, we admit defeat. Immediately, the tendons wrapped around Qin Hao's limbs spread out, and the two ghost guards, who had turned into meatballs, felt fear in their most proficient fear. Therefore, they were forced to break down and fuse with their ghostly power, becoming two individuals again. They lay on the ground, raised their heads, and screamed. And this spear did not stab down at the same time as the other party admitted defeat. The vast spear's shadow dissipated in the air. Bang! Qin Hao's feet landed firmly in the center of the training ground, and he cupped his fists at the two ghost guards in front of him. Thank you for letting me win. Hiss! God Lord Netherworld and Yumo Lord could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. If the 8-sword cultivators were suppressed by two little ghosts, then Qin Hao was fighting 1 against 5. It was also a suppression of strength, and there was not even the intense scene that they had imagined. This was the power of the perfect heaven wheel. Under the suppression of the perfect heaven wheel, the immortal great heaven wheel was still too insignificant. Guaidi's expression was very ugly, but in this battle, Qin Hao's performance was remarkable. Tactics, spear skills, and the use of divine power were almost impeccable. As expected of the perfect heaven wheel, Ghost Dao accepted his defeat wholeheartedly. Good boy. First you defeated my two ghost guards with lightning speed, weakening their overall strength 1 by 1, and then you crushed them with absolute strength. No wonder fourth brother values you so much and nurtures you carefully. Now you are another slayer. Guaidi was not happy about losing, but he admitted that Qin Hao was outstanding. He praised him repeatedly, and even glanced at the slayer beside Ji Xiang. Why didn't Guaidi have a talent like the slayer? Not only Guaidi, but God Lord Netherworld and Yumo Lord also did not have a master who could match the slayer. After all, the slayer was a perfect life form born before the underworld was destroyed. Haha, this boy's performance is also beyond my expectations. He is indeed teachable. Ji Xiang nodded and said to Guaidi, second brother, the life and death of these 8-sword cultivators belong to my Azura world. There was an agreement before the battle that the winner would have the right to control the sword cultivators. This was something that all the god lords present, including Jun Mo, had agreed to. Well, that is natural. Guaidi disdainfully glanced at the 8-sword cultivators shivering in the field. They were just a bunch of trash, and there was no use in Ghost Nest. In that case, I will take my leave first. If the 3 brothers still want to continue, you can continue to send people to learn from each other. Ji Xiang slowly got up and ordered Qin Hao, take the 8-sword cultivators back to Azura Foam. Yes, God Lord. Qin Hao accepted the order. Wait. Junimo suddenly stood up and stared coldly at Qin Hao. Then he slowly revealed a smile. The Azura guards of the massacre world are very capable, especially the one who gave birth to a perfect heaven wheel. The way of the spear is superb. Coincidentally, I have also brought a perfect heaven wheel from the Tianzhao God domain. I would like to ask the Azura guards of Azura God Lord for advice. While speaking, Junimo glanced sideways and ordered Silver Flash. Chapter 2187. Upper Star Palace, one of the great influences of the Heavenly Edict divine realm. Upper Star Palace's palace master had a perfect heavenly wheel and 8 veins of divine runes. Although he wasn't a divine lord that ruled over a world, his strength was above Feng Wei and the others. Upper Star Palace was a direct descendant of the Heavenly Edict God King. Like the West Capital, Big Dipper Mountain, Eastern Immortal Sky, and Southern Core, they were absolutely loyal. And within Upper Star Palace, there were 3 perfect heavenly wheels. Besides the palace master and an elder, Yin Shuo was one of the few perfect life forms that had been born in the Heavenly Edict divine realm for the last tens of thousands of years. Yin Shuo's birth had absorbed the essence of the Heavenly Edict divine realm's God King strength. His essence also contained a part of the Heavenly Edict God King's will. After listening to the God King's teachings, one could see how talented he was and how strong he was. Like Jun Mo, Yin Shuo had cultivated 30,000 years of divine Tao. Disregarding his background, Yin Shuo's strength wasn't much weaker than Jun Mo's. His only disadvantage was that his bloodline wasn't as strong as Jun Mo's. Jun Mo was the son of the Heavenly Edict God King, and his innate bloodline was at the God King level. The power of Grand Mist was hidden within him. This was the greatest disparity between Yin Shuo and Jun Mo, an existence that could never be made up for. A silver-clothed youth stepped out from beside Jun Mo. He had long silver hair and bright eyes like stars. His handsome features matched his superior background. His aura was perfect, as if he were one with the great Tao, as if he were formed from a perfect world. Jun Mo smiled. He looked at Ji Xiang and provocatively said, "My Heavenly Edict divine realm has many perfect heavenly wheels, and Yin Shuo is only one of them. Although the underworld is no longer what it used to be, in the endless years of the slaughter world, a perfect heavenly wheel was born. Since your heavenly wheel is also perfect, you shouldn't fear a battle." As these words came out, anger flashed in the eyes of Ji Xiang Azura, Yellow Springs Divine Lord, Gue Di, and you Demon Lord. Show off? Of course. Heavenly wheels of similar quality, what is there to fear? The smile on Ji Xiang's face disappeared. It was unknown whether he was affected by Jun Mo's words or whether he was dissatisfied with Qin Hao's decision. But he directly nodded and said, "The Heavenly Order Divine Domain's top monster wants to exchange pointers with my Slaughter World's perfect heavenly wheel. I'm also looking forward to this battle. The Slaughter World will replace the former Underworld and accept it. In a clash between God King level forces, it was already shameful for the weaker side. Even though the Nether Realm no longer existed, Jun Mo was not allowed to behave atrociously." Finally, Ji Xiang transmitted his voice to Qin Hao. "This battle, victory, is not an option. Otherwise, there's no need for you to return to Azura Peak and perish with these 8 useless sword cultivators." Qin Hao's heart trembled. At this time, he was even more convinced that the God Lord had seen through his true body. He also felt Azura's determination to defeat the heavenly mandate, divine realm's perfect heavenly wheel. Qin Hao looked at Yin Shuo. Looking at those calm, reserved eyes that had fighting spirit, he said coldly, "Azura Peak Divine Guard, Ruo Chu. Perfect heavenly wheel, 2 lines of God runes. Please enlighten me. Heavenly Order Divine Domain, direct disciple of Upper Star Palace, Yin Shuo. Perfect heavenly wheel, 3 lines of God runes. Please enlighten me, friend from the Slaughter World." Yin Shuo stepped into the arena step by step, getting closer and closer to Qin Hao. A powerful aura enveloped the arena. When the two looked at each other, their eyes collided with intense flames. In this battle, both sides had the same conditions, and both had perfect heavenly wheels. However, Yin Shuo's attainment was deeper than Qin Hao's, and he had the advantage of 1 line of God runes. However, Qin Hao had the advantage of the heavenly Daos. The Slaughter World and Ghost Realm were once part of the Underworld. Although they were now separated into 2 worlds, their Daos origins were very close, and they were not restricted by the heavenly Taos. On the other hand, Inshuo was different. Even if his heavenly wheel was perfect and he could resonate with the ghost realm's heavenly Taos through his psyche, he was not Junmo. He did not have the bloodline of an innate deity king. Thus, he could not ignore the heavenly Taos. At most, Inshuo could only alleviate the ghost realm's heavenly Taos suppression through his perfect heavenly wheel. Just like Qin Hao in Kunlun mainland and the Seamless World, he needed to cultivate step by step. In such a short period of time, it was impossible for Inshuo to fully accommodate the ghost realm's heavenly Taos. Hence, both sides had their advantages and disadvantages. There was a delicate balance in the middle, and neither side was taking advantage of the other. Let's begin, Gue Di said. His gaze lingered on Qin Hao for a few breaths, as if telling him to beat up the Tian Zhao, Celestial Realm's bastard. The same went for Huang Quan Deity Lord and Yu Demon Lord. Even if Qin Hao was not a cultivator from the Huang Quan realm or Yu Demon realm, they still hoped that Qin Hao would win, and win beautifully. Wang Wang. Two light wheels bloomed, and the thick aura of the celestial Taos seemed to be competing with each other. Qin Hao and Inshuo both pushed their celestial power to the limit, and before the battle even started, they were already in a state of eruption. On Inshuo's body, the dazzling celestial Taos gathered into a silver light wheel with starlight revolving around it. It was sacred and beautiful, and similar to his temperament, calm and dangerous. Inshuo's hands and body flickered with starlight, and on the edge of the silver light wheel, 3 extremely dazzling lines appeared. At a glance, it gave off a majestic aura, as if it contained the endless power of the stars. On Qin Hao's side, the pitch-black light of slaughter swallowed half of the sky. The temperature suddenly dropped, and black ice crystals fell from the sky. Twisted, evil spirits swayed in the black light wheel, letting out strange cries that made one's scalp tingle. Inshuo had just arrived at the Ghost region, so he did not know much about the Ghost Dao, nor did he know about the Slaughter Dao of the Slaughter World. On the other hand, Qin Hao was familiar with the Upper Star Palace. After all, he lived in the Archean realm in his first life, and, as a member of the Tian Zhao Celestial Realm, the Upper Star Palace was also under the heavenly Dao of the Archean realm. The Upper Star Palace cultivates the power of the stars. Through the pitch-black light, one could faintly see Qin Hao's sneer. In his first life, he did not know much about the Upper Star Palace, but he more or less knew that their cultivation path was the power of the stars. Qin Hao himself also cultivated the power of the stars, such as the martial monarch old ancestors' meteor law. However, at this moment he was Ruo Chu, not Li Chuji of the Sword Dao, and not Qin Hao the Pill Dao. He walked on the edge of the blade in the slaughter world. From a moment he fell in, he was forced to cultivate himself into a killing madman, even purer than Muzhan. He also wanted to see what kind of effect the evil power under the blessing of the Slaughter Dao would have on the perfect Tianlun. This would be beneficial for him to fight with Junmo again in the future. Moreover, after experiencing the torment of the power of the ghost resentment, Qin Hao's evil spirits also had a weak power of the Ghost Dao. He suddenly wanted to borrow the will of the heavenly Dao of the Ghost region to see if he could ignite the fear deep in Inshuo's heart. When the fear was ignited and gradually spread until it swallowed Inshuo, the scene would definitely be wonderful. Qin Hao silently glanced at Junmo amidst the black light of slaughter. The smile on the corner of his mouth grew wider. With a sweep of his arm, the sky full of evil spirits flew through the black light of slaughter and covered the top of Inshuo's head. Direct disciple of the Upper Star Palace? One of the few perfect heavenly Dao geniuses in the last 10,000 years? Sorry, Qin Hao did not put him in his eyes. Chapter 2188. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless fantasy translation spots of starlight flowed on Inshuo's body, as if he was formed from the starry sky. He pointed his finger lightly, and endless starlight airflow swept up, interweaving into a galaxy of the great Tao, as if forming a dazzling domain. Boom! Evil spirits shuttled through the sky and broke into the starry sky, forbidden zone. At this moment, the destructive power turned into starlight and radiated wildly, annihilating the evil spirits. Inshaw didn't have time to smile before his brows suddenly furrowed. He found that the evil spirits in the starry sky, forbidden zone, were born from nothingness. They were densely packed, and in the blink of an eye, they condensed into long and hideous heads. These evil spirit heads began to madly devour, sweeping away the power of the stars in the forbidden zone. Faintly, spots of starlight flickered in the evil aura, whistling into a black mass, covering Inshua's body. Not affected by the laws, assimilating the laws. Inshua's face instantly became incomparably solemn. Destroyed, but not destroyed, ignoring the divine power of the stars, and the evil spirits could assimilate with it. What kind of power was this? Buzz. Inshua raised his arms, raising them inch by inch. Incomparably turbulent starlight surged out of the heavenly wheel that surrounded his body. The training ground beneath his feet shook violently and kept sinking in the explosive momentum. Inshua's eyes changed, turning into silver light. His silver hair fluttered, and his transcendent temperament erupted with a great momentum, as if a complete heavenly Tao had ascended from his body. Destroy. He spat out a word, and a sacred light emblem appeared between Inshua's brows. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into a starry sky god, dominating everything in the forbidden zone. The evil spirits dissipated in howls, completely wiped out, and not a trace of evil was left. Qin Hao was unperturbed by this. Inshua was, after all, a perfect monster. If he couldn't even withstand a wave of evil spirits, then he didn't live up to his name. Spear. Qin Hao raised his arm and grabbed, and a pitch-black divine power of massacre snaked over, condensing into an azure spear. With a swing of the spear, an incomparably dark light was drawn, like a ray of light from the god of death. It actually tore a particularly eye-catching crack in the starry sky, forbidden zone that enveloped the training ground. What an amazing massacre will. When Fun Wei and Xian Qi saw this scene, their expressions changed. Why did Inshua need to be human? He was the personal disciple of the palace master of the Upper Star Palace. His heavenly wheel was perfect, and he had once listened to the teachings of the Divine King. He was publicly recognized as a top-level monster in the Tianzhou Divine region. He was not someone a small character like Huang Dao could compare to. Qin Hao's spear tore through the starry skies, forbidden domain, even though he was 10,000 years ahead of the other party. What kind of pure slaughter divine power was this? Inshua's body swayed, and he let out a muffled groan. The forbidden zone was derived from his will of the celestial wheel. Now that it was torn apart, it was equivalent to being invaded by Qin Hao's will of the spear. Inshua's spiritual soul immediately felt a murderous will attack. It was as cold as ice, and the flow of his blood slowed down a lot. Destroy. Qin Hao also spat out a word. He clenched the end of the spear and pushed it forward. The incomparably violent light in the sky wheel converged and turned into a spear shadow that could pierce through the universe. It directly pierced into the starry sky, forbidden area. Do you think you can destroy my divine Tao domain just because you want to? Inshua stretched out his palm and grasped across the air. It was as if he had grasped a corner of the sky. The entire starry sky, forbidden zone, erupted with extremely bright starlight. The divine spear of slaughter that pierced into the forbidden zone seemed to be caught by an invisible divine palm. Along with the explosion of endless starlight, there was an earth-shattering rumble. The divine spear of slaughter was completely shattered by the starry sky's power. The black massacre will slowly dissipated. Aha! I can destroy your divine Tao domain just because I want to. A sharp light flashed across Qin Hao's eyes. His will of the divine Tao radiated out and resonated with the ghost domain's heavenly Tao. A millstone-shaped black cloud that was visible to the naked eye appeared in the void. The black cloud was filled with the screams of countless ghosts and spirits. It condensed into a beam of heavenly might and divine tribulation that blasted down. It was like a divine spear that fell straight down and heavily pierced into the starry sky above the dojo. Rumble. The second earth-shattering sound shook the sky. The starlight that covered half of the ghost domain's dojo disappeared. This. Xianqi's expression changed greatly. Funwei's palms suddenly grasped the two armrests of a chair. He secretly transmitted a message to Jun Mo. Your Highness, this boy must not be left alive. Whether this Shura guard with a perfect heavenly wheel under Shura's command was Qin Hao himself, as long as there was a chance to kill him, he must not be allowed to live. Junmo's face was cold, and he did not answer. The killing intent in his eyes was enough to explain everything. He stood up and rushed forward, saying, "Yin Shua, are you all right?" "I'm fine." A trace of blood slowly flowed out from the corner of Yin Shua's mouth. He raised his hand and decisively wiped it away. The way he looked at Qin Hao became more serious. Although Qin Hao relied on the ghost domain's will of the heavenly Tao to destroy his starry sky forbidden zone, his cultivation was 10,000 years stronger than Qin Hao's. Now, in terms of divine power, Yin Shua was actually at a disadvantage. How could he bear it? This seat somewhat admires him. Gue Di waved to the side. Immediately, a ghost presented a plate of fruits. He ate with relish while praising. It was true that the ghost domain's heavenly Tao and the world of slaughter were of the same origin. After countless years, there were still some changes and differences. Qin Hao had used a perfect heavenly wheel to merge and resonate with the ghost domain's heavenly Tao in an extremely short period of time, and began to borrow the power of the heavenly Tao to fight. This ability was not something that just anyone could do. Not to mention others, at least Yin Shua, who Junimo had brought, could not do it. "Fourth brother, I intend to take this Shura guard as a disciple. Are you willing to lend him?" Netherworld Divine Lord looked at Ji Xiang from afar. Beside him, Netherworld Divine Lord was also restless, full of interest. "I won't refuse. However, I need to ask Ruo Chu's opinion. If he agrees, it's not impossible for him to stay by Big Brother's side." Ji Xiang smiled calmly. Stay? There was no way he could stay. Qin Hao's growth was too fast. Although this was a good thing, it was a pity that he could not control something for himself. Once he lost control and suffered a backlash, it was not an outcome that Shura wanted to face. And his original intention of grooming Qin Hao was to seize the earth divine power of the evil force. Therefore, he did not care about Qin Hao's life or death, much less whose disciple he would become. If Netherworld Divine Lord really wanted him, Shura would give him a corpse. At least, Qin Hao's corpse would still be perfect. Meanwhile, in the training ground, the two top monsters of the wilderness were fighting. Yin Shua's heavenly wheel Dao was forcefully broken by Qin Hao, and he was already injured. However, he would not admit defeat because of this. After all, this was just the beginning, and he had yet to reveal his true abilities. Yin Shua lightly stepped on the ground, and his body began to float up. Resplendent starlight flowed, and a set of silver divine armor appeared on his body. This silver armor was as thin as a cicada's wing, but the scales were tightly connected, protecting all the vital points on his body. It appeared extremely tough and abnormally tough. At the same time, he slowly pulled out a long staff that flowed with the radiance of stars from Yin Shua's storage ring. At this moment, Yin Shua's temperament underwent an earth-shattering change. He was like an indifferent god suppressing ghosts. His body was densely covered with great Tao starlight, and he appeared incomparably noble and imposing. Chapter 2189. 114 Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Yin Shua's Madness. The Sky Star Staff was made by the Palace Lord of the Upper Star Palace by gathering ancient star stones from the Archean realm. Yin Shua had listened to the teachings of the divine King Tianzhao, and his staff technique contained the shadow of the Sky Splitter staff. Combined with his own star law, the power unleashed was quite extraordinary. Yin Shuo is not of the divine King Tianzhao bloodline, so he can't unleash the essence of the Sky Splitter staff technique. Although he has only learned a little, it should be more than enough to deal with other perfect heaven wheels. Junmo's cold eyes surged with confidence. Unless he met someone with the bloodline of the Divine King like him or Tamanaji, it would be difficult for Yin Shuo to lose. You can't win with your Dao, so you're using physical techniques? Qin Hao sensed the fluctuation of divine power from the Sky Star staff in Yin Shuo's hand. It was much weaker than Junmo's Sky Splitter staff. Then, he silently took out the bloody slaughter spear. The killing intent gathered in this spear was extremely ferocious. No one knew how many heavenly wheels it had destroyed. The moment Qin Hao held it in his hand, the killing intent contained in the spear could greatly enhance his own killing intent. It was absolutely not inferior to Yin Shuo's Tianxing staff. Those who were arrogant in front of me in the past have long been turned into ashes. I hope a miracle can happen to you. Yin Shuo held the Sky Star staff in his hand. The divine light released by the heaven wheels and the aura he emitted were obviously strengthened. Immediately, he swung the staff and slashed down. The staff's shadow gathered by the starlight created a bright, starry world. It was extremely turbulent and covered the area where Qin Hao was. The aura wreaked havoc and turned into a great Dao universe. It was domineering and unstoppable. There are some shadows of the Sky Splitter staff technique. Qin Hao thought to himself as he stomped on the ground. Instead of retreating, he advanced towards the falling starry sky universe. Boundless evil energy flowed towards the slaughter spear in his hand. In his mind, the sword style of borrowing sword from the heavens overlapped with the spear aura. Speaking of the sword factions borrowing sword from the heavens and Cloud Dragon Sea Turner, there were some similarities. They both borrowed the momentum of the great Dao to strike from the skies. However, this spear strike was not borrowing sword from the heavens. After practicing it countless times, Qin Hao had naturally improved and improved upon it. He had only mixed in the momentum and changed the shape of the spear, changing it into a spear strike that went against the heavens. Just like when the infinite divine realm was destroyed, Qin Hao had seen countless sword gods counterattack from a hopeless situation. That scene was deeply engraved in his spear. A monstrous evil energy condensed and enveloped the slaughter spear in layers. The evil spirit was infected by the killing intent of the spear and became even more frenzied. The dark red slaughter spear exploded with a dazzling light as if it had suddenly expanded. The pitch-black spear light pierced through the starlight as if darkness had crushed the light. Boom! The starry sky staff fell. In the great Dao universe, countless stars collapsed, pierced by the scattered spear light. The staff's momentum was broken, and in an instant, Yin Shuo felt a violent surge of power crash into him. The web between his thumb and forefinger trembled, and with a ripping sound, the skin on his palm split open. His 5 fingers seemed to shatter, and he almost lost his grip on the divine tool. The starry sky staff trembled, and his body was violently thrown back. Good boy. Divine Lord Netherworld slapped the table in praise and suddenly stood up. With such a tyrannical explosive power, it would be a waste not to cultivate the bone path. Qin Hao's body of bones was simply tailor-made for the bone path. Beside him, Divine General Mo2, who was standing behind Shura, also revealed a strange smile. Although Qin Hao's spear was not his spear technique, it contained the essence of his spear way. It was simple and crude, without any defensive measures. It was an attack that would either succeed or die trying. But the consequences of this spear were not over. As it repelled Yin Shuo, the evil spirit within the spear intent howled forward, letting out ear-piercing screeches. Taking advantage of the moment Yin Shuo's divine power was stagnant, it violently interfered with his divine soul, making it impossible for him to focus. This boy has even grasped the essence of the soul path, Divine Lord Netherworld Demon praised. His spear energy, technique, and mentality were all extremely stable, and his attack methods were not simple on the surface. While shaking his opponent, the evil spirit also attacked his divine soul. Jun Mo coldly watched as In Shuo was repelled. As he watched the evil spirit invade his body and distort his features, he began to grow nervous. This was not what he had expected. This Azura guard's use of divine techniques was exceptional, and Jun Mo felt like he could see Qin Hao's figure in him. Boom! In the sky above the training ground, starlight erupted from In Shuo's body as his heavenly wheel revolved, enveloping his body like a starry sky. The evil spirit near him was destroyed, but he looked at Qin Hao with an extremely unsightly gaze. Your Excellency's staff technique must have been learned from Mistress. It's just a formality. Qin Hao had the upper hand, but he did not forget to attack In Shuo's mentality. He then shot forward again. The fear brought by the curse was removed from his soul by the Divine King's will. When his eyes returned to normal, he was covered in cold sweat. You? In Shuo pointed at Qin Hao with one hand and was furious. He swung the Tianqing rod with the other hand and smashed it down crazily, ignoring the fact that Qin Hao's spear was in his chest. What did he do? What did he say? His Royal Highness must have heard those disrespectful words. Real fear was scarier than fiction. In Shuo didn't get rid of the fear after returning to reality. On the contrary, it became even heavier. He only had one thought in mind now, and that was to kill the Shura guard in front of him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to face Jun Mo. Anger could make people lose their minds, and it was the same when one reached the divine Tao. When In Shuo swung the Tianqing rod again, there was no pattern to it, and it was full of flaws. Qin Hao smirked. Although he couldn't see into In Shuo's inner world through the curse, he could guess a thing or two from the other party's performance. How interesting. Thud! Qin Hao exerted force in his palm. The blood-red spear shone with a sharp black light and tore at In Shuo's armor. The wound was getting deeper and deeper. When the rod was about to hit him, Qin Hao suddenly pulled out the spear and swept it across In Shuo's chest. Thump! There was an incomparably heavy bombardment, mixed with the sound of bones breaking. The heavenly mandate, divine realm's outstanding, perfect, level heavenly wheel disciple, a direct disciple of heavenly star palace, was smashed into the ground like a sack by a black spear shadow, smashing open a deep pit. Qin Hao was still hovering in the air, looking down at the poor guy at his feet. He didn't go after him. He couldn't kill In Shuo. No matter how much he hated the Tianzhao domain, he had to restrain himself. He wasn't Li Chuji of the Sword Field now, but Wei Ruochu of the Azura domain. The Azura domain wouldn't expose him. He still needed this identity to protect himself. Thank you for your advice. Putting away the blood-red slaughter spear, Qin Hao smiled at In Shuo, who was still on the ground. At this time, In Shuo spat out a mouthful of blood. Having suffered a double blow to his body and soul, his eyes were bloodshot. He was filled with an extremely strong killing intent toward the Shura guard with pitch-black hair. After roaring, he lifted the Tianqing staff and flew up, still unwilling to give up. Why aren't you leaving yet? Jun Mo ordered coldly. In Shuo didn't seem to hear him. Dragging his exhaustion, he frantically activated the celestial wheel. The great path starlight gathered on the Tianqing rod, and he slammed it heavily toward Qin Hao. Whoosh! A figure flashed out of the training hall like lightning. When In Shuo's Tianqing rod fell, it landed squarely on Jun Mo's back. However, this strike, which contained monstrous anger, only made Jun Mo's body sway. It didn't even break through his protective divine light. Your Highness. In Shuo was so shocked that he stuttered. Jun Mo turned around coldly and slapped In Shuo's face. When the terrifying divine power fell, the celestial wheel around In Shuo's body instantly collapsed. Half of his handsome face was deformed, and he fell into the deep pit again. He couldn't get up for a long time. Jun Mo didn't look down. At that moment, he stared coldly at Qin Hao, as if he wanted to see the Shuragard through his eyes. Jun-mo tried to keep his tone as calm as possible, but his heaving chest and the strange look that flashed through his eyes could not hide his shock at Qin Hao's strength. This Shuragard was even sharper than he had imagined. "Ha! It's Ruochu's honor to be praised by your highness Jun-mo. Today, the divine guards of my Shuraphone tested their skills and were lucky enough to win against a perfect demon from the Tianzhou divine realm," Shura Ji-xiang said with a smile. His modesty was very hypocritical. Lord Mo coldly snorted after hearing this. "Now, the lives of these swordsmen belong to me, right?" Qin Hao landed on the ground. He did not care about any top-class demon. He only cared about the cultivators of the sword world. "Of course, they belong to you now," Jun-mo said without a care. Qin Hao nodded and retracted his evil energy. He walked in front of the 8 swordsmen and looked at the people of the sword world who were huddled together for warmth and trembling. Their eyes were filled with fear. Qin Hao felt sad, but he tried to make his tone as gentle as possible. He said, "Let's go. From now on, you will follow me and serve Azura God." Qin Hao kept mentioning Azura God. It was as though he had come here to protect Azura's reputation and to do his duty as a little divine guard. Thank you, Lord Divine Guard." The oldest swordsman hurriedly led the other 7 people to bow and thank him. When he raised his head again, there was no longer any fear on his face. There was only hysterical madness. He pulled out a short sword from his sleeve and rushed forward like a madman, stabbing toward Qin Hao's celestial energy source. The other 7 men and women followed closely behind the old swordsman. All of them became incomparably crazy. When their celestial wheels exploded, Qin Hao finally sensed that these people were in excellent condition. They were not affected by any injuries at all. Moreover, all of them had saint-grade celestial wheels. Waves of murderous divine power blasted out at the same time Qin Hao lowered his guard. Qin Hao would not have been worried under normal circumstances, but because he had fought repeatedly and wanted to save the sword cultivators, he had expended a lot of energy. That was especially so when he had clashed with Jun-mo at the end. He had expended more energy than when he had fought the 6 evil spirits and Yin Shuo from the Upper Star Palace combined. This sudden killing intent was unexpected. It attacked when Qin Hao let down his guard. It was obvious that this was premeditated. Qin Hao did not have time to release his divine power. His body instinctively counterattacked. However, because he hesitated for a moment, when he blocked the old swordsman, the other 7 men and women stabbed mercilessly into his flesh with their swords. The 7 swords hit different fatal points. Bang! Qin Hao exerted force in his palm and easily crushed the old swordsman's sword in his hand. Normally, at this time, he would have grabbed the old swordsman's head and directly destroyed his head and soul. However, Qin Hao's eyes were filled with confusion. He stared at the old swordsman in a daze. The disappointment in his eyes seemed to be asking, why? Blood flowed down Qin Hao's body. His chest, back, and neck had been pierced by the 7 swords at the same time. The tips of the swords poked out like hedgehogs. This scene also shocked everyone present. "Ha ha ha! I forgot to tell you. They are indeed from the sword realm and also practice swordsmanship. However, they have sworn allegiance to me and will not follow you." Jun-mo had achieved his goal, and everything was under his control. His laughter reverberated in the training hall of the Ghost Nest. He was as happy as he could be. "Your Royal Highness, we did it." Overjoyed, the old swordsman turned around to report the good news to Jun-mo. As he spoke, he retreated, holding the hilt of his sword. The other 7 men and women also began to retreat. They had suffered so much and cooperated with Jun-mo for this moment. Now, their mission had been successfully completed. Before they came, Jun-mo had told them that no matter who came to the rescue in the end, they only needed to stab the other party with their swords. Whether it was Qin Hao or the other heavenly wheels of the killing world, as long as they were involved, they had to have something to do with Qin Hao. Jun-mo would never doubt that. "Bastards, Mo2 roared and stared at the 8 swordsmen who had pierced Qin Hao. When he raised his hand, an endless black spear of slaughter appeared. No one dares to make trouble in my territory and be so arrogant. Gui Di, the master of the ghost nest, had a gloomy look in his eyes. As soon as he finished speaking, red lines that looked like blood vessels suddenly descended on the training hall and pierced through the bodies of the 8 swordsmen. The old swordsman threw the hilt of his sword to the ground, and his body withered visibly. His will and blood were absorbed by the red lines and turned into nourishment for Gui Di. The other 7 men and women were the same. As their bodies withered, their skeletons turned into powder and dissipated on their own. It was as if these 8 people had never existed. Plop! Qin Hao knelt on one knee. His body was full of sharp swords. Fortunately, his divine body was strong and was not affected by the laws and divine power in these swords. However, these vital acupoints were still pierced. Now, he was so weak that standing up was a problem. He would need a long time to recuperate. Ruo Chu, Jia Kong, Ing Luo, and Xin Gui rushed over and helped Qin Hao up from the ground. They felt both angry and distressed. They glared at the people of the Tianzhao divine realm. In order to save these 8 swordsmen, Ruo Chu had fought several battles. Who would have thought that these 8 beasts would turn around and bite her? Who would have thought that they were Junmo's servants? I told you not to interfere. Are you satisfied now? Ji Xiang looked at Qin Hao being carried over and waved his hand lightly. The swords that had pierced his body all turned into light and dissipated. At least I feel at ease after coming here. Qin Hao tried to raise his head and smiled honestly. It was as if he had just admitted his identity as a swordsman. But did you know that when you decided to come here, you had already lost? Jun Mo is the real winner. Ji Xiang sighed. Looking at the unconscious Qin Hao, Ji Xiang slowly turned around and said to Jun Mo, "Your Highness, Jun Mo has great means. Not only did you perfectly inherit the noble bloodline of the Tianzhao Divine King, but you also have such shrewdness. Your father must be very pleased. You flatter me. I also have something to say to the Azure Divine Lord. Take care of yourself. Don't stretch your hand too far. It's easy to break it," Jun Mo said coldly, full of warning. "Big brother, second brother, third brother. I'll take my leave first." Ji Xiang said goodbye to Nether, Gui Di, and Yumo. "When you have time, walk around more," said Nether. Ji Xiang nodded silently and glanced at the Slayer. The Slayer's body was covered in divine light. The accompanying divine guards all rode on light and left. They turned into a bunch of pitch-black shadows and disappeared into the horizon. "I've disturbed the 3 divine lords. I'll take my leave too," Jun Mo said indifferently. In order to set up this trap, he had to use some things to fob off Nether and the others. They had no friendship. "All right, if the 3 of you still care about your brotherhood, you'd better persuade the Azure Divine Lord not to meddle. Otherwise, one day I might come with an army and the massacre world will cease to exist. I hope that at that time, the 3 divine lords won't meddle. Goodbye." After Jun Mo said this, the first divine lord of the Archean world, Shangji, released a wisp of unfathomable chaos divine will. It lingered between Nether, Gui Di, and Yumo. Seeing the 3's expressions change at the same time, he was satisfied and withdrew the chaos divine will. The Tianzhao divine realm team pierced through the ghost region Heavenly Way and returned to the distant Archean world. The training hall quieted down. A blurry figure disappeared with Jun Mo and the others. He slowly stepped out of the void and came to Nether and the others. He sat in Ji Xiang's chair. No wonder he's the first divine lord of the Archean world. He has already comprehended the chaos divine will and has the capital to become a divine king, Divine Lord Nether said coldly. Among the 3 of us, no one can be Shangji's opponent. Yumo was very sure. At this time, Gui Di looked at the figure on Ji Xiang's chair. "Fourth brother, you must have felt Shangji's divine will. How does he compare to you?" At this time, the Azure evil form that had replaced Ji Xiang's seat exuded a strong malice. There was a rare look of seriousness on his face. We haven't fought, so I'm not sure. He might be stronger than me. I haven't found the lost soul. At least for now, I might not be able to defeat him. In the Xiong killing path, the evil form had inherited 90% of Azura's strength. He was stronger than any other Xiong killing path and was most in line with the essence of the Azura Divine Lord. Unfortunately, even in the complete state, he was not confident of defeating Shanji. Now, with the evil form alone, it would be even more difficult to defeat Shanji. The hatred of Ecliptic Path's death, as well as the loss of his arm, needed to be resolved through a world extermination war. Jun Emo glanced at Fenway and smiled coldly. If I were to attack Shura, would God Lord Fenway dare to take the lead? Fenway was stunned. Thinking of the Slayer's powerful strength, a hint of fear flashed past his eyes. At this time, Xian Qi said in shock, "Your Highness, this is no small matter. The Slaughter World is not the Sword World after all." "I know," Jun Emo interrupted Xian Qi. "As the former Nether Realm, the Slaughter World, Yellow Spring World, Nether Devil World, and Ghost Territory can be treated as godly king forces. These four worlds added together only lacked one godly king. How could he underestimate them? Although the Nether King is dead, the will of his fallen Tao has turned into a curse to protect his four children. I can feel that the curse in that desolate land is very strong, especially for godly king experts." He looked at Jun Mo. "Your Highness, please reconsider. These four worlds are very difficult to shake. Shura, Yellow Spring, Umo, and Guadi are all former godly princes. Their heavenly wheels are perfect, and ordinary godly masters can't fight against them. If they join forces, even I won't be able to withstand them. Moreover, Your Highness, do you remember that Shura had a slayer with a perfect heavenly wheel? 5 godly masters with perfect heavenly wheels, each with a cultivation of more than 100,000 years. Putting aside other factors, this strength alone was not something that ordinary god realms could provoke. Even godly king forces had to be wary of them. Moreover, Shura and Yellow Spring subordinates were all stronger than the 3 godly masters of the Sword World. The Slaughter Way, Yellow Spring Bone Way, Ghost Grievance Way, and Ghost Way were very difficult to deal with. If Jun Mo insisted on fighting, he could imagine that he would have to sacrifice more than half of the heavenly wheels of the heavenly Zhao God realm. Yellow Spring and the others had already been crippled by the Light Realm. Thinking back, other than these 4 main worlds, the ancient Nether King also had a godly king guard and no less than 50 or 60 subordinate godly masters. This was a godly king force at its peak. Junmo's expression did not change after hearing Shanji's advice. He even wanted to laugh, and the madness in his eyes grew stronger. Yes, even if the Nether Realm is crippled, it is still a top force in the primitive world. Our heavenly Zhao God realm alone is not enough, so Your Highness wants to borrow help. Fenway's eyes lit up. Junimo gave him a look of appreciation and patted Fenway's shoulder. Go back first and prepare for war. This time, gather all the elites of the God realm. Senior Shanji, come with me to a place. I have to meet a very annoying fellow. No matter how crazy Junimo was, he would not risk half of his family's property. Shura Jixiang was prepared to use him as a sacrifice to open the door to the deepest part of the Nether region. Junimo was certain that Qin Hao was in the massacre world. He was busy encouraging the other godly king forces to cooperate. He did not hesitate to pay such a great price to completely kill Qin Hao. The 3 godly masters of Huang, Quan also saw some problems and had ulterior motives. The person at the center of the storm was Qin Hao. Now, Shura, Junimo, and other forces were surrounding him and planning to kill him. But now, Qin Hao was silently soaking within the pool of refinement that was dense like ink, and he'd already lost consciousness while his soul was in a wandering state. Do you regret it? You tried your best to save them, but they hurt you. a hazy figure said in his consciousness. Qin Hao shook his head. Senior, you burned your boats and sacrificed the lives of all the creatures in the world to protect me. A few sword wounds are nothing. Qin Hao, the revival of the sword world and the reappearance of Sword Godly King depend on you and Wuk. Neither of you can be harmed. I would rather destroy another godly world than let anything happen to you. The hazy figure gradually became clear, revealing the warm face of godly Master Avicii. She was wearing a white robe and had a tall figure. An ancient green sword floated beside her. She was as beautiful as when she was alive. Senior, what should a person do in a hopeless situation? Qin Hao asked. Since there's no way out, then you can only break through the hopeless situation, Avicii replied, just like the bloody battle in the Avicii divine realm. That's why I don't want to struggle at death's door any longer. Qin Hao's eyes flashed with determination. Whether it was Azura or Junimo, no matter what he faced, he was prepared to charge forward. He had no chance to hide. How could he find shelter in this crevice? If he was unlucky, then he could only blame his bad luck. Avicii's figure slowly disappeared. He couldn't help Qin Hao. He was no longer here. It was just a consciousness born from Qin Hao's longing. Perhaps this consciousness wasn't Avicii at all, but Qin Hao himself talking to himself. Boundless darkness drowned his soul. It was as if he had sunk into an abyss without a trace of light. Qin Hao was immersed in the refining pool. The remaining essence of the ancient nether realm's heavenly Tao was constantly healing his wounds and erasing the nomological laws in them. He didn't know how long he had been unconscious. When he woke up, the Cold Slayer was standing in front of him. Qin Hao had been in the slaughtering world for a long time, but he had never felt any emotion from this uncrowned sovereign. Only when he faced Azura would the Slayer put down his pride and act like a humble servant. You're awake. The Divine Lord has been waiting for you for a long time. Follow me into the palace, the Slayer said. His voice was even colder than before.